Brian Rockey, and I serve as the director of the Nebraska Lottery and Charitable Gaming Division of the Nebraska Department of Revenue. We are grateful to Senator Holdcroft for his support of this proposal and for your interest in the subject. I'm testifying to answer any questions you might have. The senator covered some of the basic numbers. I would like to just add a little bit of contextual information about the dollars involved. The tax on lottery raffles is 2%, and that's for lottery raffles with proceeds in excess of $1,000, and 2% for raffles, lottery raffles with proceeds in excess of $5,000. As the senator mentioned, there's a quarterly payment and annual filing required. We thought it would be prudent to index the rates for inflation, which is where we arrived at the $15,000 amount. The $1,000, $1,000, and $5,000 figures were set in 1984. In last fiscal year, the gross handle of lottery raffle was $9,641,787. It generated $192,835 in the 2% gaming tax. Licensees handling up to and including $15,000 in gross accounted for $1,344,837 of that total, 13.9%. And the tax on their gross handle was just under $27,000. The senator covered how many organizations there are that fall into this category. They're found in 73 of the state's 93 counties, so they're spread throughout. And 154 of them would be relieved from filing by this change and raising the threshold. 255, or 58% of the 439 licensees would be relieved. I'd be happy to answer questions. Let's see what testimony got distributed.
Director Rockey, thank you. Are there any questions? Yes, Senator Raffle.
Thank you, Director Rockey. So the question I have with the charities, nonprofits, they would still be required to make quarterly payments and an annual filing. That doesn't change.
If they're subject to pay the tax, yes. So anything, the organizations that take in $15,000 or more, they would continue as they are now. For the organizations that don't have a $15,000 gross, they would actually not have to file at all.
At all.
At all, right? And there is a license that has to be obtained through the division. It would basically, and it's kind of this way now. It's really kind of the honor system. The organizations that want to do a lottery raffle have to be aware of the law that requires that you have a nonprofit status and you have the utilization of fund members and certain things that you have to do and rates to the tax rate to pay and the filing. And most of the organizations are aware of that, or they'll call if they have a question. It's fairly common knowledge that lottery raffles are regulated. So if they're not already on our list, they'll contact us and we'll answer questions. Or we have staff that sometimes will encounter activities that are not on the list as a licensed raffle. And in this case, what we would do is if they wouldn't meet the $15,000 threshold, we would certainly ensure that they are at least an in-state nonprofit organization, because that's really the crux of it.
Yes.
So when they file for the license to hold a raffle or lottery, what is that filing fee? And
I believe it's $30.
$30. Okay.
And one question that you might have is, how do they know what they're going to be taking in for gross? It really depends on the number of tickets that they plan to sell and the price of the tickets.
So can they file afterwards?
If they were to
Exceed.
activities were to exceed that, yeah, they could do that.
And then that becomes just an annual, and the tax that they pay can still be paid to
Correct.
the state quarterly.
Right.
Okay.
And they would have to, basically renew again. So if they let's say they started off and had a raffle and it was just very popular, and so they created more tickets and extended the drawing time frame, or something that engendered an increase in the gross, then they would be able to come back to the state and to the department and make that filing. it wouldn't necessarily renew for the next year. So if they, hopefully the guidance that they got from the experience would suggest to them that maybe they should go ahead and get licensed as a nonprofit.
So the most important thing is for that organization to apply for the fee and the license to hold that. And then how will you communicate this change in, I guess, law? Should it pass out of our committee and then the legislature?
Well, we have obviously a list of organizations that conduct lottery raffles with us, so we would notify them in that fashion. The Department of Revenue also has, for lack of a better term on my part, a listserv that can send out information. It would also go on our website. And we do communicate with the Nebraska Association of County Officials and League of Municipalities, as well as the veterans service organizations that we know have interest in that. So we would get the word out in that fashion.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rabel. Are there any other questions? Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for being here, Mr. Director Rocky. Are meat wheels covered by this?
What'd you call it? What'd you say?
Wheels? Meat raffles?
wheels? Yeah, meat raffle. You don't have a meat wheel? You're not allowed to ask me questions.
Right.
But yeah, a raffle
Well,
where you
they
sell
are-
a ticket and they raffle off meat
Yeah.
on the wheel.
They're not permitted. So we actually had a conversation about that before I came over. The meat raffles are really not permitted.
They happen a lot in my district.
Yeah, they're pretty popular.
Okay, we're not going to talk about it anymore.
No, that's well, and the difference between a lottery and a raffle is really what the prize is. A lottery is going to be a cash prize, and the raffle is going to be primarily merchandise. And I believe the value of the merchandise prize has to represent, I'm sorry, it escapes me. It's either 65 or 80% of the total cash taken in has to be in merchandise. But there are things like that. Just an anecdote, if I may. I was at a conference in Wisconsin, an industry conference in November, and part of the entertainment for the participants was a meat raffle. And they did some meat, but they did other merchandise. But they also noted that meat raffles are illegal in Wisconsin anyway. So.
I wouldn't want to live in Wisconsin. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Director.
Thank you.
Other proponents? Are there other proponents for 981? Going once? Opponents for LB 981? Are there any in the neutral for 981? Senator Holdcroft? Aye. Senator Holdcroft waves. That ends LB, our discussion for 981. There was one proponent submission online, and no opponents, and 0 in the neutral. We now go to LB 960 and Senator Jacobson. Welcome.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, Chairman Lowe and members of the General Affairs Committee. My name is Mike Jacobson, spelled M-I-K-E-J-A-C-O-B-S-O-N. I represent District 42 that includes Hooker, Thomas, McPherson, Logan, Lincoln, and parts of Perkins County. The current state of Nebraska competitive combat sports doesn't allow for proper seasonal development. Both kickboxing and bare knuckle boxing require a participant, regardless of ability, to turn professional on their very first attempt. This presents a steep barrier to entry that defers many from making an attempt. Those that do are also relegated to turning professional in all combat sports. So by trying kickboxing, that individual now has to compete as a professional in MMA and boxing. Professional combat sports shouldn't be entered into lightly. This bill also introduces a new sport, bare knuckle MMA. This is a blend of MMA and bare knuckle boxing, both of which are currently legal in Nebraska. Most sports have a season, and at the end of that season, you get to start fresh with a brand new record. That is not the case with combat sports. By adding variations in rule sets, apparel, and levels, we give athletes an opportunity at a fresh start and an ability to grow as a combat athlete. It is for those reasons that we are introducing LB960 to allow the growth of athletes in a safe, more orderly environment for participants to learn the sport at an appropriate level with proper oversight by the Nebraska Athletic Commissioner and provide statutory authority for the new professional sport of bare knuckle MMA. And with that, I would answer any questions. I might also note that there is a $6,000 fiscal note, so a very modest fiscal note on the bill.
Thank you, Senator Jacobson. Senator Raybold has a question.
Yes, thank you. So if you have declared that you're a professional martial arts kickboxer, you cannot participate at that lower level that you're proposing.
That would be my understanding of it, that professionals compete at the professional level. The problem with this is if somebody wants to try this the first time, there is no amateur status, so you're required to become a professional. And then by becoming a professional in this sport, you're required to be a professional in all other MMA sports. So that creates a real problem for those who want to enter this to begin with.
So when does one declare themselves to be a professional?
I think when they decide they want to compete at the professional level.
Okay.
Senator Hughes.
Thanks for coming, Senator Jacobson.
I almost dread to hear this question, but go ahead.
You should be. So, like, you know, I'm all about wellness and initiatives. What do we think? Do you think the Capital Commission, we could set up a cage in the rotunda? And if we've got like two senators that are disagreeing, just throw them in there. And now that they can be amateurs, that would work out pretty good.
I thought you might raise this question. In fact, I anticipated this very question from you. So I figured we'd do it right after the jazzercise competition before the day that you had promised us.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hughes. Any other questions?
I do have a proponent that will be speaking after me that can answer any more specific questions, but I think it gives you a pretty good sense of the overview. And I do need other, I'll probably hang around here to see if there are any opponents, but I do need to head to another committee hearing.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Will anybody be closing? Do you know?
I'll see how it goes here.
Okay. Are there any proponents for LB 960? Welcome to the General Affairs Committee. If you would please state your name and then spell it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. My name is Brad Garrick, BradGarrick.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I've done martial arts for most of my life, owned an MMA gym for over a decade. And I'm also currently a city council member for the city of North Platte. I'd like to first thank you guys for all the work that you do. It's usually a thankless job with long hours away from your family, so I understand that. And so thank you for everything that you do. Martial arts has played a major role in molding the man I am today. Without it, I'm not sure where I would have ended up. I certainly use the discipline and the lessons learned throughout my years, and now I work towards sharing those life lessons with others. In my opinion, the current statute has some problems. It is missing amateur divisions for both kickboxing and bare knuckle boxing. This forces new participants to immediately start out as a professional. That is both dangerous and creates a barrier to entry that will keep most away. By adding the amateur ranks, it allows martial artists to grow naturally, similar to how MMA and boxing is handled today. I also feel that the addition of bare knuckle MMA as a sport gives martial artists in the state of Nebraska more options. In most sports, you get a new season every year. In combat sports, you only get 2 seasons, your amateur season and your professional season. This adds another division that athletes can compete in, essentially giving them another season and another fresh start. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if you might have some.
Thank you, Mr. Garrick. Are there any questions? I have a friend who, I don't know if he's still competing, but competed at one time in the MMA. And, I wouldn't want to cross him, so.
I miss my days of competition.
No other questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? Oh, another proponent. Please come up. Please state your name and spell it, then continue.
Good afternoon. So my name is Henry Ems from Lincoln, Nebraska. HENRYEMS. So in January of 2021, I actually sat in front of the committee legalizing bare knuckle boxing in the state of Nebraska. Since then, we had 3 events that were actually televised worldwide at the Liberty First Credit Union Arena, formerly Ralston Arena, in which that arena was sold out. So that the Nebraska collected the taxes for that said event, which noted by the Senator Jacobson, your fiscal responsibility for just beginning this is very low. So would have tenfolded any investment done in that. Now, since then, there's been 3 bare knuckle events for boxing and 1 kickboxing event that was put in with boxing. At the time when this bill was introduced, I actually pleaded with Justin Wayne at the time that wrote it to have amateur kickboxing because we had multiple gyms in the area, Omaha, Lincoln, and Western Nebraska, which sent kickboxers to Iowa and other states to get experience and to do tournaments, which we found that if we hosted these in Nebraska, we could keep the money here, as well as get kids experience here. While that didn't get changed, I believe that that was part of the reason that we didn't see the number of kickboxing events done. Now, I currently am the matchmaker for Dynasty Combat Sports, currently the largest mixed martial arts promotion in the state of Nebraska. We host events at Pinnacle Bank Arena twice a year, Liberty First Credit Union. We did 8 events last year, and we will do roughly about the same this year. Now, while I agree with the amateurization of kickboxing and bringing in bare knuckle MMA, which has been very popular, specifically in the southern regions, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, I do want to speak out against amateur bare knuckle MMA and boxing. Typically, what we have seen is fighters that have done that have come in with previous experience in mixed martial arts, having already been pros. The sport itself has led to several lacerations. While concussions might not be as large as MMA, you are still at an incredible risk. While there hasn't been the training system for amateur bare knuckle, they have received previous experience in either professional mixed martial arts, kickboxing, or boxing. Now, a state that has actually been in the forefront of combat sports is Kansas. One example is Kansas hosted their first ever amateur bare knuckle boxing fight September 23rd. They did not actually compete in bare knuckle. The contestants wore 4-ounce MMA gloves. So it was not legal in a sense that, or it was not marketed as the sport might have seemed. So I'm willing to answer any questions. I have 10 years just in the business side of martial arts on top of about 18 years of martial arts experience, or 28 years, my bad, before that.
Thank you, Mr. Ems, and I'm marking you down as a proponent and opponent.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are there any questions? Yes, Senator Rabel.
Thank you, Mr. Ems. How do you prohibit someone who may have been a pro kickboxer then wants to come in as an amateur bare knuckle boxer? Do you make them fill out a form? Have you, at any point in your career of sports, been listed as a pro?
So at this point, actually, professionals, so the State Athletic Commission handles that. So if you are listed as a professional fighter in any sport, as previously stated, you're not allowed to compete at an amateur level, as they see that as to go back in a different sport that might be a considerable experience difference. Say I have 90 kickboxing fights. Good example, actually, I had helped an 11-time South African kickboxing champ competed in bare knuckle. For him to go back to amateur boxing, though he was just a kickboxer, would have been a considerable experience difference. So the athletic commission themselves and the promoters and matchmakers themselves are responsible for finding out if these guys have professional experience in any sport.
So if they participate in a sport without declaring themselves a professional in another sport or without the entity that's doing the screening, are they disqualified? Are they penalized or anything like that? Because it sounds like they would give an amateur kickboxer a beating.
So typically what's actually done is you're just not allowed, so you have to go through a licensing phase. So every amateur fighter, or even professional fighter, has a fighter license themselves. So as the commission and the matchmakers themselves are going through the licensing progress, you list out any previous experience, what you've done. We have different registries that go through and states record those fights. So if they go through and find out that you have previous professional experience, they will deny you an amateur license in the state.
Go ahead.
Do you think we have put in enough safeguards in the language that we are using to, add this amateur sport
So
to protect and the individuals who might be the real amateurs competing against the pros? Is there language in this specific bill that
yes,
will
ma'am.
weed
So
them out?
as far as professionals competing against amateurs, we've never really had the issue, especially now that states have as these sports have become legal in other states, commissions have gotten on board with recording process, so that it is considerably harder in any United States state to compete as a professional and not have it recorded. So as far as the safety that's concerned, that's done. I would, like I said, be opposed to the amateur bare knuckle, as we do have other sports that will get you ready for that. Even actually, if I'm on record in 2021, I said no one would want to do that for free anyway. So
Is it up to the event organizer to make sure that if you register that you are not a pro? Who is responsible for doing the verification? Is it the event organizer or?
both the organizer themselves and the commissioner. So the organizer themselves will enter the fighter's information into what's called the National Registry. At that point, typically you either have some kind of red flag come up stating that they fought as a professional. The commissioner themselves will review it and they approve all the fights. So if I would have myself made a mistake as a matchmaker, which at this point has not happened in, I believe, roughly about 10 years, that the commission will step in and stop that fight from happening. The only time that's happened is typically with fighters having a legal change in name or having fought in states at the time that weren't sanctioned. Nowadays, every state is sanctioned for MMA, boxing, so forth. So that is not as much of an issue.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rabel. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Are there any other opponents? Any proponents? Is there anybody in the neutral? Senator Jacobson, would you like to close?
Well, thank you, Chairman Lowe. Debated on whether to close, but given this last mixed testimony, I thought it might be important to clear a couple things up. First of all, let's be clear that the athletic commissioner would set the rules and, as the previous testifier testified, would also be involved with the sanctions. So this idea of somebody coming in as a professional in any other mixed martial art and competing at the bare knuckle level would be stopped by the commissioner. It could certainly be done with the rules that would be laid out. We're still left with the original issue that we talked about, is that you can't get experience in bare knuckle in competition without getting an amateur status first. Otherwise, you're a professional, and you're a professional in all those sports. There isn't another way for entry into bare knuckle that has been alluded to. You're not going to get there through MMA. It's a whole different sport. So the reason for including the bare knuckle in this is so that the commissioner can set the rules, make sure that the appropriate safeguards are in place, but that these individuals can start at the amateur level, not the professional level, and nix themselves from being able to be an amateur in any of the other mixed martial arts because they chose to try bare knuckle and had to do it at the professional level. So I don't think we want to miss the point of what the legislation is doing. Ultimately, the athletic commissioner will set those rules. So I'd stand for any further questions.
Thank you, Senator Jacobson. Senator Rabel.
I think Senator Hughes probably wanted to ask you this question, like, when are you going to retire from the pro circuit?
Myself,
Yes.
well, I've given that a lot of thought. I'm going to wait until after the legislature because I think Senator Hughes is going to be here as long as I am, and I want to keep my skill level up.
I understand. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Rabel. Any other questions? Seeing none,
Thank you for your time.
thank you.
Were there any for that one?
There were no online comments for 960.
All right, we are ready to hear testimony on, or the bill LB 836. Senator Lowe, proceed.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Hughes and the members of the General Affairs Committee. My name is John Lowe, that's JOHNLOWE, and I represent the District 37, which includes Kearney, Gibbon, and Shelton. Today, I'm happy to introduce LB 836, a bill dealing with co-branded alcohol. Co-branded alcohol is defined as an alcohol liquor beverage containing the same similar brand name, logo, or packaging as non-alcoholic beverages. These things like alcoholic Mountain Dew, Sunny D with alcohol, or alcoholic Arizona green tea. LB 836 is designed to ensure these alcoholic brands are not sold next to their non-alcoholic counterparts. The concept here is very simple. We do not want to run into an issue where an individual accidentally buys an alcoholic beverage, or an issue where a child hands their parents an alcoholic beverage on accident for them to buy. LB 836 requires that these co-branded products are not sold adjacent to soft drinks, juice, bottled water, candy, snack food containing cartoons or youth-oriented images. One caveat in this is that in stores smaller than 2,500 square feet, the products can be sold adjacent to these items, but a clearly visible sign that says this product is an alcoholic beverage available only to persons who are 21 years of age or older must be presented to the product. LB 836 is based on a rule that Illinois Liquor Control Commission enacted last summer. I want to thank the different interest groups that worked with me on this bill. My office has had lots of conversations with grocery stores and beverage companies to find language that satisfies all sides. I believe 836 strikes a good balance of regulating safety and wellness while ensuring we are not putting a major burden on private businesses in Nebraska. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right. Thank you, Senator Lowe. Do we have questions? Go ahead, Senator Rabel.
Thank you, Senator Lowe. So are you seeing that this is a problem in our state of Nebraska?
I have come across at least one store that I've been in where on the checkout aisle, they had beer and these type of things kind of lined up as a last minute item to grab. And I just don't believe that's a place for them because they are commingled together.
Yes, so in today's proceeding, are we having someone from the Liquor Commission discuss their concerns as well?
I assume so.
Okay. I guess I look at it and the packaging is pretty clear when it tells it's a malt beverage or it contains alcohol.
I would say when these ready-to-drink canned cocktails first came out, they were called Jack and Coke or something, Jim Beam and Cola or something. So it was pretty well known that the brand, but here you have, the first page is Arizona green tea. And that one, Arizona hard green tea. The coloring is similar, and as far as the blues and the pinks, it could be easily mixed. The next page is a Bang mix. The Bang is similar. The cans are similar. And just the little diamond says it has 5% alcohol in it. The hard Mountain Dew. You say, well, Mountain Dew cans are green, but Mountain Dew cans are all different colors. Again, just the plain Mountain Dew. So the packaging is getting confusing on some of these items. And for a child to recognize a Mountain Dew can that they can have a drink and grab one of these that might be right next to it may be a problem.
Go ahead.
So is this a bill that you're bringing to our attention because you have a concern, or did another organization?
The Liquor Commission also had a concern with this.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Do we
Yes.
have other questions? Senator Kavanaugh?
Thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you, Chairman Lowe, for bringing this bill. So these Mountain Dew ones is the one I'm looking at. Would this satisfy the statute that you're proposing, or would this not be good enough?
Well, they just can't be placed next to.
Oh, okay. I thought you had some labeling requirement too.
Not,
Maybe that was the font size of the sign. Sorry.
yeah.
Okay. So I got you now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions?
I know other states have made the cans change their labeling, but
We're not there yet.
we're not there.
Go ahead, Senator.
Sorry, you mentioned the state of Illinois, did they make requirements to change the labeling, or did they
No.
make requirements that you have to segregate them?
They made requirements that they have to segregate them, like this is modeled after the Illinois.
Okay, thank you.
So I have,
Which was most reasonable, the one we found.
So I have a question. I
Yes.
know, I think I know, when you're a retailer, a lot of times the supplier comes in and sets up the displays. Let's just say you're a grocery store owner or whatever, and the suppliers come in and set it up and they violated this, is there, I guess, what happens if you're found in violation of the act, or how are we gonna, maybe once this goes through, all our distributors are gonna know what the deal is and make sure
That will be up to the Liquor Commission.
Okay, we can follow that up. Okay, any other questions? Nope. All right, thank you, Senator Lowe. Let's start with proponents. Any proponents come forward, please? Thank you. Go ahead, state your name, spell it, and then.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hughes, members of the General Affairs Committee. My name is Rich Otto, RICHOTTO, and I am here on behalf of the Nebraska Grocery Industry Association, the Nebraska Beverage Association, and the Nebraska Retail Federation, testifying in support of Senator Lowe's LB 836, which would regulate how co-branded alcohol products are displayed. We thank Senator Lowe and his staff for reaching out to the industry and accepting feedback on this bill. It was introduced with flexibility for smaller retailers and seeks to avoid unintended consequences of other business practices common in the grocery industry, such as slotting fees. We'd like the committee to consider more clearly defining or instructing the Liquor Control Commission to, in their regulation, more clearly define what immediately adjacent means. For instance, similar products at a store, if they're in the next cooler over, does that count? So Senator Lowe mentioned the 2,500. So we appreciate the small store sign provision. We have C-stores that are above that, but yet still tend to have coolers with, Mountain Dew here, and then maybe they'll have this hard Mountain Dew in the next one over. Is that immediately adjacent? How far? So we would like to have clear understanding of that for those stores that are above the 2,500, but yet still have somewhat small footprints that they can be not outside of violation just by having them in maybe the next cooler over. Otherwise, we generally support the approach. Again, thanks to Senator Lowe for reaching out, working with us, and using the Illinois model for this legislation. With that, any questions you may have?
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Otto? All right, seeing none. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you, Mr. Otto, for being here. Well, I guess I'm wondering what you kind of got a little parsing about what is immediately adjacent to. And I mean, there's a pretty clear definition of that. You're thinking that isn't clarifying enough that they could be in another shelf, I guess.
Well, it is fairly clear in the language. So there probably doesn't need to be clarification there. As we work with the commission, we had specific stores reach out to me and say, hey, does this count or does this count? And so I'm sure the commission will work with us saying, hey, we think that violates the immediately adjacent. We just, again, this is those medium-sized C-stores that tend to have everything in coolers. Often you'll see like single Mountain Dews, and then how far away do they actually have to have the hard Mountain Dew? Because typically a lot of them have these coolers for their alcohol, and those may connect to the other coolers that are selling soda and other things. And they were concerned that that they would obviously want to use that for it, but that would still be in violation of immediately adjacent. So I'm sure we can work with the commission on it.
Thank you. And I had another question about it's section 4, which is kind of this shall not apply. I guess is your interpretation, maybe you're the wrong person to ask this, but you're who I've got right now. This section does not apply to a shelf, aisle, display, or display area in which primary items for sale contain alcohol, liquor, or in areas in which a person younger than 21 years of age are prohibited from entering. I guess you have a comment on that section? My read on that is in a section that's primarily for the sale of alcohol, you can put
Right. So
non-alcoholic beverages next to the alcoholic beverages.
just off the top of my head, my thought is that many stores have specific alcohol sections. Larger grocery stores have an alcohol section. Often we do put Mountain Dew and other products in those sections as maybe, Coke to go with Jack to mix it with. So it's convenient for customers. They don't have to walk all the way across the aisle. We're saying if it's in that section, we should be allowed to sell the non-alcoholic products with those as convenience to our customers and not get in trouble since it's the alcohol section.
So these are the sections that are essentially function like a standalone liquor store.
Liquor store, right. But we have these non-alcohol products in those sections for convenience.
Okay. So you're not an Omaha guy, but there's a Hy-Vee on 78th and Cass that has kind of like almost a standalone liquor store. Are you familiar with that one?
I'm not familiar with that particular location.
But more like that as opposed to my Hy-Vee, which is 52nd and Center, that has basically 1 or 2 aisles of alcohol.
Right. So usually, you're exactly right. I interpret it as the kind of additional section. If the aisles are separated, we'd hope that would still count potentially. Some aren't as divided as others. And so if the intent of the grocer is to keep it with the alcohol, we would like the commission to see that as this section that, hey, we had this in the alcohol part. And just because we put some Coke over there, that we're not in violation.
Would it make a difference if they had a standalone other Coke section or not?
Well, that's the thing we're trying to avoid. I don't think it does. We're trying to avoid having these items in the soda aisle. So,
well, I mean, in this particular part where you can put Coke next to the hard alcohol, does it make a difference if you also have Coke in the soda aisle?
It shouldn't, in my interpretation, or I don't think it should. Grocers don't want it to. We want to have both.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Anybody else? All right, thank you for your testimony. Next proponent.
Good afternoon, Vice Chairman Hughes and members of the General Affairs Committee. To answer Senator Rabel's question, yes, somebody from the Liquor Control Commission will be talking today. My name is Hobart Roop. I have the privilege of serving as Executive Director for the Nebraska Liquor Control Commission, and we are in support of this bill.
Can you spell name and?
Hobart, Hobertrupe. You would think I've done this enough, I should remember that. The concern, these products have become a concern over the last couple of years and has been growing. First, you saw, of course, flavored malt beverages, which were which are a beer-based alcoholic product, which are often, made to be taste nothing like a beer. Most of your seltzers and such are actually a flavored malt beverage category. And then when you saw the canned cocktails begin, you saw more of this. You saw a little commingling. The first one I remember seeing was Jack and Coke. But it was clear. It was clearly Jack Daniel's iconography and Coke. It was clearly there's a combination of the two. Since then, you've seen a lot of the products that you heard Senator Lowe discuss, and there are only more of them coming down the pipe. This was one of the reasons why this committee may remember a couple of years ago, we had the brand registration part of the bill so we could actually track these things better. That system is set to go live. It has by statute by July 1st, where it's going to probably go live middle of May. We'll start building the database out for that perspective as our new computer system goes online. So this has been a concern the commission's had. You heard Senator Lowe speak of the Illinois model. This was an issue that's been discussed recently at the National Conference of State Liquor Administrators. A lot of states are handling this. Illinois attempted to do it by a bill, but got in too late, so it couldn't get passed. And so the Illinois Liquor Control Commission did an emergency rules. I think they're still trying to seek statutory authority as well to do it. That's how serious it was to them. Virginia has also adopted similar rules. I know part of the debate when people were looking was, are we going to go sort of the Virginia model, the Illinois model? The Illinois model worked a little bit better because Illinois is similar to Nebraska in that it's a licensing commission, whereas you'll remember Virginia is a control state where they actually act as the wholesaler. So that was so I think the model of Illinois was a little more clear, and they'd already done a lot of the heavy lifting on trying to help and address some of the small vendors. These brands can be confusing. I'll give the industry some, they try to make it look a little bit different. They'll try to do different can sizes, different can shapes, but a lot of times all they'll do is invert the coloration. It'll be, where if the non-alcoholic brand is green with black lettering, they'll go black with green lettering. One of the most confusing ones I've seen recently is a brand of a company called Beast. They're Monsters version, and they have the same 3 claw marks going down, only they're very similarly colored. And you got to really look. I mean, if you have to look to see what it is, that gets a little bit concerning. So yeah, this is an issue that not only Nebraska is dealing with, but nationwide as these products are coming out. And I really want to commend Senator Lowe for taking the advantage of going forward. I see I'm out of time, so I'd be happy to answer any technical questions.
Any questions? Go ahead, Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you for being here, Mr. Roop. So you heard my conversation with Mr. Otto. So I guess I'm curious about this. I mean, well, one, do you have a response to his about this?
I think he's right. I think the way I read the bill when it came out was, as you'll look at, you said Hy-Vee. I know that most of the Russes have a similar situation where you have a clearly marked area off with a separate cash register as well for alcohol. And so you might go ahead and have mixers. Primarily what I would say is so you don't have to have the 7-Up there. You don't have to go all the way into the store and get that if you want to buy the 2-liter 7-Up to go home with the product. But more than likely, if you look into those, it's very small because they don't want to take up space for that too much. So your main display of those Coke products, as you said earlier, will be in the soft drink aisle, where you might have a couple of them in the other areas. Primarily is for each of consumers, for mixers. And those areas, it's sort of one of those, you clearly see that it's a clearly demarked, like as you use the term, almost a mini liquor store. It's clearly that's where the liquor is being sold. That's where all the wines are at. That's clearly a liquor area. So if I see a 10-year-old run into there and come out with something about a parent, I'll look very carefully as what the kid brought out. So.
And what about Mr. Otto's comment about the contiguous free cooler?
I think the statute is pretty clear, actually. We, of course, the commission has a history of working with the industry and with other interested parties to make sure that's clear. I anticipate what would happen with this. We probably would meet with, if it were to pass, we would meet with most of the industry and do a temporary guidance document right off the bat, sort of telling people what it is, what to look for, what's not. And generally, we would probably work with our patrol investigators. We would probably do a first problem warning, and then a second time probably then look for an actual violation to give them a shot. That's anytime there's a major change like this on this, we try to work with the industry to get them into compliance. We always try to get them into compliance rather than going down the punishment path first.
Thank you.
All right. Other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank
Other proponents?
Good afternoon, Chris Wagner, CHRIS WAGNER, with Project Extra Mile, which is a community coalition of partnerships across the state, and we're working to reduce and prevent alcohol-related harms. We're here in support of LB 836 and want to thank Senator Lowe and the commission for supporting this important piece of legislation. Our state has experienced too many tragedies involving young people who lose their lives early due to alcohol. An estimated 22 underage Nebraska youth lose their lives every year due to alcohol-related causes, resulting in over 1,000 years of potential life lost. LB 836, we believe, takes the first step towards the common sense measure that would help prevent these tragic deaths by separating or distinguishing alcoholic beverages from non-alcoholic beverages in retail locations across our state, in which these products are branded in a similar manner. Research has found that brands utilizing more youth-appealing content were more likely to be consumed by youth, and other studies have shown underage exposure to alcohol increases earlier alcohol use initiation and engagement in binge and hazardous drinking among youth. I realize that Senator Lowe did hand out some examples, so I had also included in my testimony some examples as well to show you really how similar those can be. And I would just note, of course, for us as adults, it's a little bit easier for us to discern these alcoholic products from non-alcoholic ones, but for youth, I just don't think they're quite as discerning as adults are. And I think this is a good compromise, as we heard earlier, to make sure that we're at least identifying these alcoholic beverages that look similarly as alcoholic, and if at all possible, separating those, just to make sure that we are keeping these out of the eyes and out of the hands of youth. With that, I would urge you to act as quickly as possible as you can on this bill and get it to the governor. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your testimony. Questions? Nothing. Very good.
Okay.
Thank you for
Thank you.
coming today. Do we have any other proponents? Okay, seeing none. Opponent. Okay, neutral. None. All right, Senator Lowe, closing, please.
Well, I'd like to thank the testifiers that came up here, Mr. Otto, Mr. Roop, Director Roop, and Mr. Wagner. Back in my youth, it was easier for law enforcement officers to spot a product if you were driving down the road with an open beer can, because everybody knew what a Budweiser can look like, or a Pabst Blue Ribbon can look like. So you bought the wraparounds to hide what you were drinking. That's a little bit harder now when it comes directly from the grocery store or the convenience store, and your children are involved. So I'd like General Affairs Committee to take a look at this, and we can put it on consent agenda maybe. There weren't any opposition. There was not any opposition to this. So with that, I'm closing.
Thank you. And for the record, we had 3 proponents, 1 opponent, and 0 neutral in terms of comments. So, all right, that concludes 8:36. So now we will switch gears and go to LB 839. Ready, you ready? All right.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Hughes, and fellow members of the General Affairs Committee. My name is John Lowe, that's JOHN-LOWE, and I represent District 37, which is made up of Kearney, Gibbon, and Shelton. LB 839 makes 3 changes that impact the State Racing and Gaming Commission. First, it allows the governor to remove a commissioner with cause. I believe this is an important tool for the governor to have because it will allow for greater executive branch and legislative branch oversight of the commission. I mention extra legislative oversight because if a governor were to remove a commissioner, the governor would then appoint a new member who would have to receive approval from this committee and the legislature as a whole. I should add that this language matches the language dealing with the Liquor Control Commission. These are both important commissions with oversight of industries that bring in significant tax revenue and are areas that do deal with vices that the state heavily regulates. It makes sense to me that the Liquor Control Commission and the Racing and Gaming Commission operate in similar fashion when it comes to their commission. LB 839 also looks at changes to see how the executive director of the Racing and Gaming Commission is selected. Currently, this position is simply selected by the commission. LB 839 changes that by maintaining the commission selection, but also requires the governor sign off on the hire. Lastly, 839 requires the executive director of the Racing and Gaming Commission does not engage in any other profession or work in any other businesses. The requirement is intended to ensure that the executive director is a full-time employee, focusing his or her attention to this critically important position. Colleagues, I believe 839 is the most important gaming-related bill that we will see this session. It provides critically important oversight of the commission and ensures the executive legislative branch share this oversight. As many of you know, I'm not a fan of gambling in Nebraska. I oppose gambling before the constitutional amendment, and I worked hard advocating against the amendment. But the people of Nebraska have spoken. Since that time, I've worked to make sure we have the best practices and the best possible oversight of this industry. LB 839 follows in that same direction. And with that, I would be happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Senator Lowe. Do we have questions? Yes, Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hughes, and thank you, Chairman Lowe, for bringing this bill. One thing, I guess you just said reminded me of the fact, like, how much work goes into creating these regulations, and we were building these from Holdcroft, and now we need to fix some of the things that we built. So I appreciate you taking the time to do that. And I guess my question that jumped out at me of this, in terms of the hiring, how would a conflict be resolved if the commission wants to hire somebody and the governor doesn't as the executive director? Is there a mechanism to resolve that conflict, or is it just we don't hire anybody until they both agree?
I think we just don't hire anybody until they both agree.
Thank you.
Other questions? Senator Rabel.
Yes, Senator Lowe, so any hiring of the Racing and Gaming Commissioner, Executive Director, has to come through the legislature for approval, just like a lot of the
Commissioners, like the Arts Council or something like that.
And then, we heard recently the controversy in the paper about some of the decisions made by the executive director in purchasing certain types of weapons. And then it seemed like the director resigned. And I guess who puts pressure on the individual to resign, or how is that handled? And I guess, do we have someone from racing and gaming to talk a little bit about the use of those weapons during their?
I'm not sure if there's anybody behind me coming up to speak on that this
Okay.
time. But right now, it's just the commission that can hire or fire the director.
And so this change would allow the governor to do so with cause.
Yes,
And right now, the governor does not have a say.
he does not have a say.
So the governor would now have a say in the hiring and the firing.
Yes.
Thank you.
Further questions? I guess I have one question, which maybe I can answer myself. The full-time executive director, how is their salary funded? Is that just from Racing and Gambling Commission?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. What's that?
You're entirely cash funded.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, thank you. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So can I, thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you again, Chairman. I just wanted to clarify one thing from the conversation we're just having. You're in this bill, you're changing the hiring of the executive director has to have the approval of the governor. That's one part. And then the other part is that the governor can fire commissioners from the commission. Is that right? And my understanding is that the governor can't fire the executive director. Is that right?
Mhm.
Okay. Just want to make sure. There was a bit of a, I wanted to clarify for Senator Raybold. So
Thank you.
we're giving the governor this bill would give the governor the authority to fire commissioners. The commissioners were the ones who have the ability to fire the executive director.
Mhm.
Is that correct? Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Lowe.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, thank you, Senator Lowe. Do we have any proponents to this bill? Okay, not seeing any. Any opponents? And any neutral? Well, that was easy. Would you like to sit back up here, Senator Lowe? And he waves. So this was the quickest one today. LB 839 is finished. So, we're gonna take just a 3-minute pause before this last one, because someone might go use a facility quick. Is that all right? 5 minutes, 5 minutes break, go.
Ready?
All right, where does that go?
Okay.
Got my shoes off.
Don't get too comfortable.
I got too comfortable.
Good job. I knew you were gonna ask Senator Jacobson that question.
Oh my God. And I'll, I'll know how to work with it. Okay, so.
Senator Lowe, take it away with AM 2035 to LB 685.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hughes and fellow members of the General Affairs Committee. My name is John Lowe, that's JOHNLOWE, and I represent District 37, which is Gibbon, Shelton, and Kearney. AM 2035 is a white copy amendment that replaces all of the language of LB 685, which was this white book here before. We have worked diligently through the interim with the industry and with the lottery division of the Department of Revenue, who oversees and regulates these type of skill games. To that end, AM 2035 keeps the mechanical amusement device tax under the Department of Revenue. Last year, Senator Breezy had proposed LB 685 that we move the regulation of these games to the Racing and Gaming Commission. And we have decided it's better suited to stay under the jurisdiction of the Department of Revenue. The amendment adds some critical new language that is needed to adequately cover the scope of what is needed to properly regulate these games. We have included a definition of manufacturer of cash devices into the statutes, which are proposing they pay an annual licensing fee of $5,000. We are proposing distributors of the cash devices also pay that same annual license fee. To be clear, this license fee is a once-a-year fee paid at the highest level of the skill game industry. This fee is not applied to the bars, restaurants, grocery stores, etc., that are home to the device. And the fee is $5,000 no matter how many machines the manufacturers or distributors have. If they have one machine in the state or 10,000 machines, it is a total of $5,000 per year for each manufacturer or distributor. AM 2035 requires background checks for anyone applying for a license and it requires the creation of a central server that each cash device would be required to be connected to for accurate reporting revenue. We have made sure the authority of the department is clear for passing of the rules and regulations, and we have allowed for administrative penalties to be assessed by the department for the violations of this law. These sections of the amendment deal with some extra regulation of the industry. I have had some conversations about the background check aspects of this, and I'm working on an amendment to address a few concerns that were brought up on this issue. The central server will allow the Department of Revenue to know how much money needs to be taxed from each machine, and it will allow them to have more clear understanding of any potential unregistered machines in the state. Allowing the department to write clear rules and regulations, creating an enforcement mechanism is just common sense and is desperately needed. We also added language that requires an operator of skill games to have at least 60% of their gross operating revenue come from other sources of income. This language was added because we are now seeing skill games set up as de facto casinos, where the only thing occurring at the location is skill games. This language will allow bars, restaurants, grocery stores, and gas stations to continue operating skill games while cracking down on these de facto casinos. This amendment levies a tax of 5% on the net operating revenue. I repeat, the net operating revenue of each cash device annually. Net operating revenue is also defined in this amendment. Previous efforts on taxing these devices put the tax rate at 20%, but after talking with industry leaders, the 5% number seemed to make more sense. Currently, games of skill pay two types of fees or taxes to the state. One is $35 a year occupation tax. They also pay a $250 a year licensing fee for a total of $285. That is the extent of the revenue the state currently receives from each one of these machines. This tax revenue will be split up in a few different ways. 20% will go to the charitable gaming division to help fund the enforcement of this act. 2.5% will go to compulsive gamblers assistance fund, and another 2.5% will go to the general fund. 10% will go to the Nebraska Tourism Commission. 40% will go to the property tax credit cash fund. And at least 25% will go to the county treasurer for the county the machines are in. Unless the machines are in a city, then the money will be split evenly between the city and the county. At the end of the day, AM2035 is an effort to ensure these skill games are properly regulated and that these games start paying taxes on their income. I think it is very important piece of legislation. I'd be happy to answer any of the questions.
All right. Thank you, Senator Lowe. We'll start with Senator Raybold. Go ahead.
Thank you. Senator Lowe, correct me. I may have misheard you say this. I thought you said each operating device gets taxed, but then in your clarifying, it says 5% of the net operating revenue of the location.
Of each machine.
So each device gets taxed 5% of the net.
That's the proposal.
Okay, thank you.
Of the net, not cash paid in.
Yes. And, more
Yep, go ahead.
So does the Department of Revenue already operate a central server so that?
No, the Department of Revenue does not operate a central server. That will have to be something that they will have to purchase. And the tax money that comes from this will help pay for that.
Pay for that, and will they have
And
to
the
hire?
upkeep.
Will they have to hire additional staff to?
I have not seen the fiscal note on this yet
Okay, thank you.
because it is an AM.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, and I just, for my own clarification, for a local entity, they will pay $1,000 per year per machine to register it, and then the 5% on net. Is that, am I wrong? Am I right?
No.
Okay, that's not, what's the occupation?
They'll pay the sticker fee of $250.
The sticker fee is $250 a year.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. So it's the $250 a
Per
year
machine.
per machine plus the 5% net tax. Okay, that's what I wanted to. $250. Okay. Yes, Senator Kavanaugh.
Sorry. Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you, Chairman Lowe, for bringing this very interesting topic to talk about. Does that 5% net, would you be able to deduct the $285 as part of a cost from that, or is that separate revenue, I guess, or separate cost?
Talk to your accountant.
All right. I hope to not have to. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Nope. All right. Thank you.
It's just nice to see everybody here, and it's cooler in here this time than last year.
And I'm freezing. So. Oops. All right. We are going to start with proponents. So come on up.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Hughes, Senator Lowe. For the record, I'm Brian Rockey, BRIAN ROCKEY. I serve as the Director of the Nebraska Lottery and Charitable Gaming Division of the Nebraska Department of Revenue. I'm here testifying today as a proponent of this amendment in this bill. Previously, you may recall, I provided testimony on the original bill in February and then as part of the interim study process several weeks ago. One thing I'd like to itemize in my testimony is the fee structure in the amendment to kind of give you a context of how this would work, at least how we see it. Currently, there are 76 distributors, and this was as of calendar year end. So each of them paying a $5,000 annual fee. There are 5,852 decals issued right now, and the annual decal fee of $250. There are 1,611 operators. The annual decal fee or annual licensure fee for the operators would be $250. And then I believe 4 manufacturers presently in the field, so $5,000 a year. So the annual fee structure looks to be $2,265,750. The division has estimated $365 million in annual cash device sales. Assuming devices pay out 60%, the tax on the net proposed by the amendment would yield $7.3 million. I'd be happy to answer any other questions, any questions you have. And if you have no questions, thank you for your consideration.
All right. Do we have questions for Mr. Rocky? Go ahead, Senator Raybold.
Director Rocky, could you talk a little bit about how you envision this would get implemented?
Certainly. We currently, of course, have a relationship with the licensees. They go through a process. The biggest question is probably the central system. Georgia is probably the prototypical state. They have been managing these devices with the central system for 10 years or so, and they have 22,000 or so devices. It is also part of the Department of Revenue, part of the lottery actually there. We've had some consultation with Georgia representatives on what goes into their system and how their RFP was done. So we would obviously do a procurement, we'd do an RFP. There are a few vendors in the industry that would provide this sort of system. The very crude thumbnail sketch of this was that each device would have a connection, I assume an IP address or something, to the central system that would allow the division to see their daily activity. And some of the operators, I think, are already able to do that because of the large number of devices that they perhaps have. So I don't know if it would be a pass through from their central system to our central system, or if it would be one-to-one. We'd have to sort that out. But I don't know if that answered your question.
Look, I guess looking at the Georgia example, did they have to add more staff? Or like, I assume it's like the system and software and upgrades and
Right.
connectivity and.
They do have dedicated staff for the cash device. They call it COAM, cash operated amusement devices. They do have a specific staff for that. We would potentially have to have an additional, IT person, as well as, maybe an additional inspector, an investigator in the field. The pricing on the project is going to vary depending on the vendors. In the case of Georgia, I think their vendor bid 1.39% or something like that of the annual handle. In the first year, the vendor received $880,000. Again, that's a very large system, 22,000 plus locations, much larger than ours would be. But to give you a sense, it will probably be a percentage of sales. From the lottery perspective, that is our experience when we bid a system. Typically, the industry providers will do it on a percentage of sales as opposed to a flat rate.
Thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Rocky? I have just one. On that centralized system, do you have just kind of a rundown? I mean, clearly it's going to keep track of money coming into the machine, money going out.
Hours of operation, most likely. The status of the device. One of the things that we noted, I think, when we provided information at the interim study hearing is we have a certain number of decals that are sold, $250 a piece, but that doesn't match the same number of devices in the field. And why is that? Well, because the decals are procured and they may be on devices that are in the warehouse, or they're waiting devices. Devices move periodically for service or whatever. So that's one of the status questions or status issues I think that the system would show us is the device active at this location, or is it inactive in the warehouse, or is it at this location?
Okay. Other questions? All right, seeing none, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Other proponents?
My name is Matthew Phillipson. I'm one of the owners of Trestle Games and Midwest Amusements. We're located in Bellevue, Nebraska. Here today to
Can you spell your name and last
Matthew, P as in Paul, HILIPPSEN. Here today to discuss how we are in favor of this bill. A year ago, we sat up here and were against it, but we're very thankful to Senator Lowe and his office to be able to work with our industry to modify it to come to a mutual agreement on how this could possibly move forward for this industry. Trestle, we're a licensed manufacturer in multiple different jurisdictions, including the state of Georgia, other class 3 jurisdictions like South Dakota, Montana, Louisiana, and West Virginia. And some of these jurisdictions do have a central server, okay? And so therefore, as a manufacturer, we are able to modify and have our software be approved by a third-party independent laboratory, like we already did here, that that we met the technical standards to have our software approved by the Department of Revenue. But any other type of advanced, okay, technical standard, we already meet that in different jurisdictions. So it can be done by other manufacturers, and it just happens that we're located in Bellevue. And it's been fortunate for our company's growth to be able to manufacture devices and sell them or operate them here in the state of Nebraska, but also build our manufacturing company here in Nebraska to be able to distribute and sell product throughout the United States. And I've actually relocated from Florida. We've relocated people from Iowa, Texas, and Tennessee to become Nebraska residents. And therefore, I just hired 2 more people today. So, you know, we're erasing that brain drain that, you know, from people going down to Kansas City, Chicago, or Denver. And, you know, I have other customers and other competitors that have actually continued to grow their businesses here in the state of Nebraska because of the opportunity on either operating skill games or building their businesses for other states. So with that, I'd take any questions regarding any of the technical standards or any other ideas or questions you may have about manufacturing.
Okay. Thank you. Questions? Oh, Senator Holdcroft.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I noticed that Director Rocky provided some numbers here, and he lists 4 manufacturers. Is that right? I mean, you being one of 4 different.
For the most part, yes. So I think there might be a little more than that, but yes, Trestle Games is one of the approved manufacturers here in the state.
There's probably 4 in Nebraska. So, how many different variants do you have of these skill games?
We have 8 different software sets, all right, that are approved cash devices here in the state of Nebraska.
Okay, I'm just curious, how do you hook into a central?
So right now on our central server, or our software hooks through a COM port on the logic board or game board inside the cabinet. Okay, it's in a secure enclosure, and therefore that COM port is dedicated only to the central server. All right, if something else happens, if it stops communicating, it sets up an alarm and the device ceases to work at that time.
Okay, I'm still not following you. Is this an internet connection then to some kind of a website or?
Basically, a server meeting is that you have it, for instance, in the lottery office or the Department of Revenue here, and then it communicates with a site controller at the location.
Thank
you. Thank you. Senator Rabel.
As a follow-up question to Senator Holdcroft, who would be responsible for the maintenance of that connection? Is it the manufacturer? Is it, say, the location itself, the retailer, or who's responsible for the maintenance of that connectivity? Is there a fee? And then also any software upgrades or anything like that? Who would be responsible? And who's responsible for the security?
So the security of the device is responsible by the manufacturer or the distributor that operates that device in the location. Internet, I mean, there's instances where we provide internet, okay, or the location. It just becomes down to the negotiation with the location. But either way, you would need a internet connection at that location. So to be able for it to work. So it's whatever the Department of Revenue would require, either the location or the operator to maintain that.
Okay, thank you. Good. Other questions? All right, seeing none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next proponent.
Hi, Senators. My name is Mark Phelan. It's spelled Phelan. I'm president of U.S. Gaming for Excel Entertainment. Excel is the largest route gaming operator in the United States. For those who may not be aware, route gaming is the business of placing electronic gaming machines that includes both games of chance and games of skill in third-party retail establishments in states where specifically there's a statute in the state law that allows that activity, and there's a regulatory authority that confirms that the participants in that market comply with that state law. We, as a company, currently operate about 26,000 of these electronic gaming machines across 9 states. And we partner with over 3,500 retail establishments. We decided to come into the mechanical amusement device and cash device market. They're different machines. In Nebraska in July of 2022, only after we confirmed that the state had a very clear legal opinion about the legality of these machines and that there was a regulator in which both requirements were met. Since then, we operate about 350 mechanical amusement device machines, as well as about 800 cash device machines across 250 retail partners from here all the way to across the state. We employ about 70 skilled technicians, cash processing specialists, and account managers who help these retail partners use our games to support their primary retail business. All of these people obviously pay Nebraska state income tax. Our company in Nebraska is called Husker Gaming, and any income generated by that entity in Nebraska pays Nebraska state income tax, as well as personal property tax on all our machines, as well as property taxes through our 3 state warehouses and offices. We are a proud Nebraska company. We represent locations all over the state. We believe that on average about 7 to 10 employees are at each of our locations that we partner with, so that every day our machines, we believe, help at least 2,000 entrepreneurs complement their primary retail business across the state. We initially invested in Nebraska in part because of the historical collaboration between the government of Nebraska and entrepreneurs and people who are trying to grow the economy here. In regards to Senator Lowe's amendment, we believe that's very consistent with that type of historical precedent. We commend Senator Lowe for seeking out collaboration from the industry, which is extremely rare in my experiences. And he was very careful to take our feedback specifically and to approve the bill, which I think he did. I think the bill goes a long way to make this industry much more mainstream and a much more collaborative and solid partner with the state. And so we do support it. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions? We'll go with Senator Raybold first.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Phelan, for coming. In any of the 9 states that you operate in, do they have a central server?
They do, ma'am. In fact, all of them do.
In all the 9 states?
Yeah. We're actually in Georgia. That's a reasonable comparable with this market because those games are games of skill, not games of chance. Slight correction on the statistics there. I'm very familiar with them. It's actually about 32,000 games. It's about 6 times as big as this market. They also have a large staff. I think it's about 25 people, and they have their own administrative court, actually. So it's a large infrastructure there. I think this bill recognizes that we're not that market, and I think the tax rates differ a bit. And I think you have to sort of appreciate the fact that one's much bigger than others and sort of have proposed reasonable taxation, and that's why we support this bill.
Thank you.
Senator Holdcroft.
Thank you, Vice Chair. So I'm going back to Director Rocky's spreadsheet again, and are you then a distributor?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so it says we have like 76 distributors.
That's right.
In the state.
Yeah.
And you're one of 76.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I guess that's all the questions I have.
All right. Other questions? Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hughes, and thanks for being here. So you touched on something about the reasonable taxation, I imagine. So you're a proponent of the bill partly because you like the kind of certainty, the regulatory structure it's creating. Does that sound
Yes, sir.
all right?
Yeah.
And you're not opposed to the tax because you think a 5% is reasonable?
I do. I mean, we're in 9 jurisdictions. They all vary significantly in terms of their tax rate. I think the proposed tax rate in this legislation is very cognizant of kind of the economics of the market, which I don't think could support a rate that's higher than what's been proposed. And so I think it's a very reasonable rate.
I guess I have 2 follow-up questions to that. One is you kind of hinted at Georgia has a different tax rate. Do you happen to know what that is?
It's 10%.
There's 10%. And if this bill goes forward, would your position change if the tax rate were to be deviated from 5%?
So it's a great question. I think Georgia's an interesting comparable because it's a skill game, but as I pointed out, it's a significantly much larger market. Their games also make about $110 in gross revenue per day. The Nebraska Legislature's research group produced a paper on the skill market in Nebraska in December, and they estimated that the gross revenue per Nebraska skill game is about $32. So their market's about 3 times bigger than ours. And so I think you have to take that into consideration when you tax a business. I would also point out that the Nebraska casino market's actually pretty good comparable to our market in that it's in Nebraska. That business pays a 20% tax rate on its revenue. But I would also add that that business benefits greatly from the advantages accrued because of that license. And, I'll list them off very briefly, but they have a monopoly on gaming. We do not. There's 74 of us, and we all compete very aggressively with each other. They allow 4 different gaming products, not just slot machines. What their games are called slot machines. They also do sports betting, table games like poker and blackjack, and pari-mutuel betting. And they all get to do it under one roof. So if you have a broken game, you can walk 20 feet down the carpet and fix the game, whereas anyone in this room has to get into a car and drive, and a lot of our locations are 100 miles away. So the cost structure is much higher for us. And finally, again, I'll refer to the report produced by the Nebraska Legislature, but our games, according to that report, make about $32 per day. If you look at the Warhorse Casino in Lincoln, and just look at the Racing Commission for 2023, their machines generated $350, so almost 10 times more. So I do not think a rate that's greater than 5% would be particularly fair to the industry nor supportive.
Thank you.
Further questions? Oh, yep. Go ahead, Senator.
Just so I understand the cash flow. So as a distributor, you pay $5,000 flat fee.
We do not yet, Senator, but that's what's
That would
proposed.
be under the proposal.
Yes, sir.
And the 5% is actually paid by the operator?
It would be probably, sure, yeah. It's not clear, but yeah, it would, that's what
Okay,
we.
so how do you get, you get your machines obviously from the manufacturer and then you distribute them, and how do you get compensated then for the machines that you're distributing?
So I would purchase a machine. I would contract with like a bar owner. I'd put my machines in his bar. He would give me, say call it 200 square feet. The games would either make money or not. And then I would pay him some part of that revenue as sort of
But you're collecting the revenue then?
We actually collect the cash, we process it, and we just wire it to the business owner.
So the $250 per decal for the device, who's buying that?
Currently, we do. The operator, the distributor in this state.
And then the operator, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to make sure I got this straight. He also has to pay $250.
No, he does not. Or she.
Okay, thank you.
Under current law.
Well, yeah, I'm just trying to go by what the director provided. And he lists there, it would be about 1,611 operators. The annual fee for them would be $250. Maybe that's under the new bill. but,
Maybe he meant the distributor typically the distributor pays that fee, a decal fee. You can be both though in some cases. So the nomenclature gets mixed
okay, he was
up.
just trying to estimate the annual.
Yeah.
So my question to follow up then with what Senator, I'm guessing that's the contract that the distributor has made with the operator. In that contract, you would lay out if either you pay that device fee or decal fee or the operator does, and who's going to pay the tax. I mean, that would, right?
That's all negotiable.
That would be all negotiable between, I would imagine, distributor and operator. Okay.
Thank you.
Other questions from the? All right. Thank you for your
Thanks, Senator.
testimony.
Appreciate it.
Next proponent.
Good afternoon. My name is Jim Halls, JIMHAWES, and I'm testifying today on behalf of Winners Marketing Incorporated in support of AM2035 to LB685. I want to thank Senator Lowe and his staff for the hard work they put into it. We're very appreciative of that. I'm the Director of Operations and Attorney for Winners Marketing, which manufactures and distributes skill games in a number of states, including Nebraska. So we've seen what works for the industry and what does not. We're also in Georgia, as we've talked about some today. Winner supports the amendment to LB 685 and has some suggestions for improving it. It is important to have certainty with regards to taxing cash devices, and the amendments give us that certainty. So that's a great thing. Establishing a central server is also incredibly important to maintaining the integrity of the industry, so we applaud that as well. The amendments put in additional safeguards, such as requiring operators to verify the age of anyone requesting to play the cash device and prohibiting operators from charging a fee in return for prize payment. All very good things. The amendment provides the department with greater authority to administer the act, such as giving the department the ability to review all documents between distributors, manufacturers, and operators, and providing for retail establishment location standards. Again, these are great things for the industry. It's extremely important that distributors, manufacturers, and operators are doing things the right way and being good corporate citizens. The amendments offer transparency to help assure Nebraskans that this is a legitimate industry. Now, there are a few things that we believe could improve the amendments. These include a mandatory percentage split of the net operating revenue. In this case, 5% to the state, and then split equally 47.5 and 47.5 with the operator and distributor. We also believe that the requirement that the locations generate at least 60% of the revenue from sources other than cash devices can be adjusted so that it attains the goal of prohibiting these mini casinos that we've talked about, but saves the department significant resources that would be required to enforce such a requirement, and is more fair to legitimate businesses that may not have high volume sales but rely on cash device revenue to keep the doors open. One idea, in addition to lowering this percentage, is to only have a percentage requirement for locations with more than 4 cash devices. I've passed around a handout, or handout's been passed out, that further explains these proposed improvements and the reasoning behind them. I again thank the General Affairs Committee for allowing me to provide testimony, and I'll take questions if there are any.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hayes. Questions for? So you got off easy.
All right.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your time. My name is Ryan Bosen. That's spelled B-O-E-S-E-N. I represent Bosselman Enterprises as a member of the Nebraska Petroleum Marketers and Convenience Store Operators.
Is it R-Y-A-N or R-Y?
Yeah, I'm sorry, R-Y-A-N, yes.
Thank you.
The corporation the Nebraska corporation that I represent, as well as the Bosselman family's intent in support of this bill, was to create, or the hopes of creating, a fair and equitable kind of tax structure to legitimize the skill game industry and hopefully make this a profitable and fair and equitable kind of business venture for everyone involved. And that's corporations like ourselves, as well as the little guys, the nonprofits of the state as well. Our concern is that this 5% we feel is fair. Once this gets out of committee, will it all of a sudden turn into a 20%? That's our concern there. So 5% fair, anything more, it's really, it's going to hurt the small guys more than anything. And any questions? We operate, just to be clear, we operate skill games in our convenience stores, restaurants, and hotels located in the state of Nebraska. We're based out of Grand Island, Nebraska.
We have questions from Mr. Bozick. Go ahead, Senator Rabel.
Do you typically have more than 4 devices in each of your different locations?
Well, that would depend on the square footage. The way that the rules are now, it depends on how large the establishment is. We operate anywhere between 2 and 12 units per location, depending on how large. At one of our travel centers, for example, due to the square footage of being possibly 15,000 square feet, we have about 14 games there. Most of our convenience stores, they max out at 4 just due to the square footage constraints of the current rules.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right, thank you for coming in. Next proponent.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hughes and members of General Affairs Committee. My name is Rich Otto, Richotto. I'm here on behalf of the Nebraska Hospitality Association, Restaurants and Hotels, and the Nebraska Grocery Industry Association, testifying in support of Senator Lowe's AM2035 to LB685. Last year, we opposed LB685 as written and would like to thank Senator Lowe for addressing concerns raised by the industry. As Senator Lowe stated in his opening, we do have concerns about the licensing language that he said he was going to bring additional language in another amendment to. And we have provided our concerns to his staff as well and appreciate their willingness to work on those. We are particularly pleased Senator Lowe kept oversight of the industry at the Department of Revenue and that Nebraska is looking at establishing the central server. The central server is essential to allow the state to track dollars flowing in and out of these machines, legitimizing the industry and creating a fair and level playing field for all involved. Again, like we've stated, some have stated, and the Nebraska Supreme Court, the legislature, we have decided these are mechanical amusement devices. These are not gambling devices. A reasonable tax and structure will encourage this industry can grow at a sustainable rate, resulting in more tax collection and more tax relief. Throwing a gambling tax at this industry would not result in more revenue. It would put Nebraska on an island, freezing any new investment, driving out popular games, and be a disadvantage to small business. Again, we appreciate the work of Senator Lowe, think this is a reasonable approach, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, thank you, Mr. Otto. Questions? You got off easy also. Next proponent.
Hello.
Go ahead.
My name is Cynthia Smith, Cynthia Smith, SMITH. Just here to testify as a proponent of Senator Lowe's AM 2035 LB685. I am the director of racing for Hastings Exposition and Racing. We're the only quarter horse racetrack here in the state of Nebraska. And I just wanted to just say we do see these games pretty much everywhere. And we believe that these games are games of skill and they should have strict oversight and regulation, just like racetracks and casinos do. That's it.
All right. We have questions from Ms. Smith. Thank you for making it down today. Next proponent.
That was wrong.
No one? All righty, let's go to opponents, please.
Low chair.
I know you feel tiny.
Yeah.
sitting
Good
here.
afternoon, Senator Hughes, members of the General Affairs Committee. My name is Kent Rogert, Kentrogert, and I'm here representing American Amusement as their registered lobbyist. American Amusements is a Nebraska-born and based business and manufacturer of bank shot machines, the original skill device. To be clear, I'm testifying opposition of what's written in the amendment today. Some of the ideas and concepts are close to being okay with us. So I'll start off, I'll just kind of go through the bill. In current law dating back to 1969 would never license a location, but rather who owns the machines and calls them operators. Most machines are now owned by what we're defining here as a distributor. So I would suggest we likely need a new or better definition of an operator, a location where games are set, and or we change or expand the definition of distributor. Maybe that is what Senator Lowe's bringing in the amendment. Background checks. Many or most of these establishments have already undergone a background check and submitted fingerprints for a liquor license. Could be amended to say if they have a liquor license in good standing, further background check is not required. We want to make sure that these background checks are not required annually as they are not for liquor licenses. Several places in the bill list causes of denial for various license types of these items. A violation of the Mechanical Amusement Device Tax Act. Our question would be ever or any violation. Failure to pay taxes. Again, the question would be ever. What does failure mean? Were they late? Did they make a mistake or miscalculation? Are they awaiting a court decision or a process on an appeal? Also, citation by Liquor Control Commission for a violation. For what? Most establishments, restaurants and bars have had a violation for a liquor selling beer to a minor in a compliance check. We suggest that you could add the words for illegal gambling activities to tighten that up or something like that. That is in the Keno statutes. Also, the section or that several lines on failure to demonstrate good character, honesty, and integrity. Those are pretty subjective items. Let's see. I would suggest manufacturers and distributors don't have liquor license, and maybe this language is unnecessary. The $5,000 fee on the manufacturer is one thing, but some distributors are very small, and that fee could push them to sell to a larger distributor. We think the central server is going to be a little more expensive than maybe we're estimating. We've seen those can cost anywhere in the low single-digit $1 million and tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands to run per year. Also on the age verification requirements, people don't generally ask to play these games. They just sit down and play. Bars aren't generally checking ID of everyone who orders a drink. Many, of course, are obviously of age or they're repeat customers. It's already against the law to let underage persons play these games, so I think that's probably covered. Also, the section on income, there are small nonprofits that don't generate much income or any income, and so that might already put them out of being able to have these machines. I will answer any questions and be happy to work with committee counsel on amending the amendment.
Okay. Questions for Mr. Rogert? Oh, go ahead, Senator Randall.
I think, Mr. Robert, you answered a question I would have asked. Are you willing to work with Senator Lowe on some of your observations about changes and fine tuning?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And we agree with a lot of the things that have been said previously.
Terrific. Thank you.
So I have a question. The concern on the central database or whatever, collecting that information, the issue, the concern, I don't know. Why do you guys care what it costs if it's, are you concerned about the information it's collecting or, it sounds like other distributors in other states have done this and it's good information to have, I'm guessing.
Yep.
Is there anything specific about it that you don't?
Well, I think first of all, we would suggest that nobody who operates systems in the state should be the one monitoring all the systems of the state. So if we have to contract with somebody that's out of the state, it just might be a little more money. And where's that money coming from? Will it all of a sudden come back to the manufacturers or distributors for an ask for an increased fee or tax? And so we just want everybody to be on the awareness side of what we're doing, what we're getting into.
Okay, but in terms of what the information that is being collected, that's not an issue.
Nope, it's fine.
All right. And, oh, yes, Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you, Mr. Ruger, for being here. Could you elaborate a little bit on the part you talked about the nonprofits and not? 'Cause I
Sure.
think Mr. Hawes had a similar point in his constructive criticisms.
Yeah, I think if we might need some sort of delineation put in there. Say you've got a Eagles club out in Senator Brewer's district, perchance, and there's, their daily revenue is 10 guys that come in and buy 3 $2 bush lights, a day. So that, and they're really not generating any income. They're just trying to keep the lights on so they can keep their Eagles club going. And so these machines are getting them a little extra income, but it may be the same amount of income that they're pulling in on the alcohol sales or more. So definitely the 60% cap there it would make them ineligible to have some of these machines, and thus they could end up closing their doors.
So would your suggestion be that have a different cap for extremely low volume on both sides?
Potentially. We just want to make sure that the little guy gets carved out and held onto in the amendment.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next opponent.
My name is Joyce Frieden, Joyce. Frieden's Frieden. And I am from Kearney, and I own a small amusement route with my husband, Greg. We've been doing this for over 30 years. Mostly started out doing dartboards, pool tables, pinball machines, and then gradually got into the skill games. And I am against this amendment, even though John Lowe is my senator. I listened to Governor Pilling in his State of State address, and he was talking about how, as government, we need to be less strict. We need to reduce regulations and bureaucracy. And he talked about Operation Clean Out the Closets, where we tried to get rid of all these mandates that at needless costs to businesses that are just trying to thrive. And he talked about how the senators need to partner with people to get government out of the way and focus on its core functions again. And I don't think this amendment is helping anybody. First off, as far as the background check, I mean, if we were working with young kids, if I was a coach, I can see the background checks. But for us to have to get a background check, pay for it every year, even our locations, if you read the print, they say all operators will have to get background checks. That means all my locations are going to have to go through that every year. And I don't really think that's fair to them. And they're not criminals. It's almost like you are reaching out thinking anybody that has an amusement game is a criminal. And that is not the case. There maybe are a few bad apples out in our industry that are creating all the problems. The people that are actually following the rules, you're going to put all these strict mandates on us that are going to put us out of business. And then the tax commissioner has the power to deny anybody a license, from a manufacturer to a distributor to an operator. If he doesn't like your character, he can say you don't get a license. And how is that fair? Then you also talk about if they get a liquor infraction. One of my locations gets caught selling to a minor, the state can take away their skill game license. That's what it says in there. And if you look at the Liquor Commission on how many violations there are, and there's quite a few. So I don't know if the tax commissioner, he could go around and he could get rid of all the skill games if he really wanted to, according to the language in this bill. And then it talks about in the bill that when they lose their license, there's no appeal process. So you lose your license for forever. So once you lose your cash device license, you can't get it back. Then there's also the $1,000 a day fine. So if your machine gets caught without a sticker on it, which I've had stickers being pulled off my machines, it's $1,000 a day. And then I could lose my cash device license and basically put me out of business. And then about the IDing everybody, that is going to be not feasible. I mean, most of our accounts are short-staffed. They're lucky to have help in the first place. So they're going to have to watch everybody going back to play a machine. That is just going to be impossible to do. And I mean, we've never had problems with minors playing. Usually they don't have cash with them even to play them. But to me, it would make more sense if when they went to cash in the ticket, then they would have to show their ID and then you could verify them. Just like if you're going to buy a drink, then you show your ID.
You're on the road. I'm sorry. Any questions for Ms. Fagan?
And also, I was going to say, I don't like the central server idea either. I just think that's going to cost millions of dollars to the state taxpayers. And if you pass all these other things, most of his operators are going to be out of business and you're not going to have machines to put into your central server.
Senator Rabel.
That would have been my question. What were your other concerns that you wanted to detail? But I think you hit your list, right?
Yeah. And I feel like, I know Senator Lowe must have worked with a lot of people in the industry, according to other people that have talked, but I don't think the small operator, the hometown person that's been around for 30 years was in the conversation.
Other questions? Go ahead.
Ms. Frieden, did you talk? I don't remember you saying how many locations do you have?
50 maybe. I think we have, as far as the skill games, we maybe have 50 machines out, which is really small potatoes compared to the guy that had 800 of them out. So, and I don't know, I mean, which seems a little unfair. He can maybe pay $5,000 for a distributor license, but that's kind of me having to pay $5,000 too. Seems a little bit unfair.
So how many games do you gaming devices do you have at each location that you are in?
Typically we probably have two. And we do a lot of the other games too. We have darts and pool and jukeboxes, and we're not just in the state to be skill game operators to go after the quick buck. We've been here 30 years doing this day in and day out.
Okay, thank you very much.
Other questions? Go ahead.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you for being here.
Yes.
So you said you have about 50 devices.
Mhm.
So you fall in the category, Senator Holdcroft keeps referencing this, and I've got it in my pile of papers here, but about 76 distributors in the state, is that?
Yes, we're considered a distributor.
Okay.
I thought we were considered an operator, but I got on my little license and it does say I'm a distributor.
So you'd be subject to the 5,000.
Correct.
So in terms of constructive criticism, which is like my favorite thing to talk about, would you suggest or be amenable to like a threshold if you have a certain number of devices in the field, you'd be subject to a different,
Like more of a tiered system?
yeah, for the fee?
I think that would be a lot more fair than, making everybody having to pay $5,000. I mean, because it's really not an equal playing field. I mean,
So as long as you're here and you've got your more than 5 minutes or 3 minutes, do you have a suggestion of where to tier it?
I don't know, people might get mad at me if I mean,
Somewhere above 50.
I don't know. I would say, maybe $500 up to $5,000, create a range of, and, and it's also talking about the operators have to pay a $250 fee too, to get a license. So any location I have also has to pay $250 for a license.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions for Ms. Frieden? I had one thing that you mentioned right off, the background check. And then I think in a prior testimony, Mr. Rogert suggested, so I'm assuming a lot of these places, they have a liquor license.
Correct. So I don't know where the background check
Right,
really.
but would you be, he suggested that if you've already got the liquor license, which has required a background check, if that verbiage was changed to, that would count, is that, I mean, I'm assuming you would be okay with that then?
Well, I think I would pass a background check. I passed other ones. So.
Right, but like, instead of having to do it again, if that.
But I don't know, do you really have to do it every year?
So that's another, I don't, yeah.
I mean, that seems a little redundant.
And then, can you just exactly verbalize why you don't like the central server issue?
I just think it's a lot of money, and then, we're going to have to pay all the taxes. I just don't think there's going to be, as a small operator, I don't think there's going to be enough money left in it to really want me to even put skill games out.
So prior testimony had said that central server, and I don't think they have a number yet, but it would just take a % of whatever money is already coming in But do you have an issue with the information that it's collecting?
I don't have not really per se. I mean, I just think the expense of it. I mean,
But even though we don't exactly know what the expense is.
and I would say millions of dollars it's going to take to put a central server in. I mean, you're talking about hooking up a lot of games to this. You're going to talk about staff.
I don't know. Other
maintenance.
states, it doesn't seem like that high, but who knows? So I guess that's something to figure out.
But we have 6,000 machines compared to Georgia. What do you say? 30 some
Right,
thousand?
right.
32,000? I
Right.
mean,
Yeah. Anyway, okay. Anything else? Thank you for coming in. Appreciate it. Next opponent. Yeah, same sweatshirt.
My name is Greg Frieden, and I'm Joyce's husband. We own Fun Time Amusement out of Kearney. We've been in business 30 years, and we've done pool, darts, all that kind of stuff. And then we started doing skill games when they came along. And everything lately, we have gotten so much pressure from competition that's come in from the skill games. And with all this regulation that's going on, we've got all the stuff in LB685. Lots of concerns with the regulation of it. And then the extra expense, we're being considered, we've been considered, I guess, distributors. And now we've got the extra $5,000 that we've got to pay, and we're small. One thing that's not been mentioned yet, and it's not part of LB685, but it relates to the whole thing, is that the Department of Revenue has audited operators on their skill game revenue. And there's an additional tax that's not part of this, but we're facing that also. And they want to charge distributors a lease tax on their half of the income. So, and that's going to be equivalent to sales tax. So we're looking at another 7% of half of what we make on skill games that's going to be on top of all this. And our $5,000, and we're small. It's just Joyce and I, and there's other operators that are small. And what all this is going to do, if it all goes through, is it's going to squeeze out the little guy. This supports the bigger companies from out of state coming in. And nobody's going to want to get in this business. It's small, it's local, and it's just turning into big business. We've had to change, a lot of it's good competition, but we're having to go out and buy equipment that otherwise we would not have to, not just skill games, but other equipment. And now we're looking at possibly having to buy redemption machines and put them out in our locations. Very, very expensive. We spent more this last year on equipment than we made on our skill games. And we have to keep updating and stay current with new stuff, or these other companies are going to, take over. And this is all just more regulation and more cost and less reason that we'd even want to stay in business and do this. So.
Okay. Thank you. Questions for Mr. Frieden? I think your wife got all the questions. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Next opponent.
John Fox, JOHNFOX. Yeah, thank you, members of the committee. Start with presently, there's a lawsuit under file, American Amusements versus Department of Revenue. Again, this case will determine the legality of the department's currently contrary position regarding sales tax and cash devices, as Greg Frieden just described. So, yeah, in my opinion, AM2035 doesn't help Nebraska. It hurts, and much of it is unnecessary. We've heard casino bosses compare bank shot and form and revenue, and now under regulation and with their casino games at the racetracks. First of all, it gives a chance to make a lot more money. By example, South Dakota with their BLT market in 2023 did 600% more than the cash devices in Nebraska, despite South Dakota being half the population. Last, cash devices returned 50% of the money right back to Nebraska businesses, charities, nonprofits, fraternals, veterans organization. That makes cash devices incomparable with all comparisons. The hearing regulations aren't prudent, they're punitive. Failed to produce a book, a record, it has been in violation of the Liquor Control Act, failed to provide clear and convincing evidence of the applicant's qualification. The department has the authority to approve all locations. It made a material misrepresentation or a material fact, ID all players, annual background checks. Seems the rules are of a black heart, rife with the ability to be abused by the Department of Revenue. You'll hear and have heard from the big out-of-state corporations that these are just fine. And that's just great because unlike Nebraska-born companies, they can pick up their toys, head down the highway, resurrect themselves, come back as a new name or a new corporate entity. You also are a gaggle of lobbyists with questionable reading diligence. Say this is all fine. But they don't have to live with the consequences of too much power and too few hands. That's for the little guy, as we see. The homegrown Nebraska companies don't have lawyers or teams of accountants that beck and call to produce a document or a record or preclude someone from making a misrepresentation. The coin machine companies are shop owners, barkeeps, nonprofits, fraternals. They're hurt by these unnecessary rules. These are the people that you sit next to in church, and they deserve to be better, treated better than a convict on parole. I'll also note, we never needed these rules before the casino boss said we do.
Okay. Thank you for your testimony. Questions for Mr. Fox? I have a question. You're with American Amusement, so you are a distributor.
I'm a manufacturer.
You're a manufacturer. You're one of the four.
I'm.
Yeah, that's right. You do your bank shop guy. That's right.
Senator.
Sorry, I remember that. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you. Next opponent.
So I was about to say good morning. It's not. My name is Andy Dobel, D-O-B-E-L. I am with Greater America Distributing. I will start with explaining the industry does not use the same language as the current regulations or the bill. I am an actual distributor. What this calls a distributor is an operator. What this calls an operator is a location. So I will probably fumble over my terms. I apologize. I don't know how it got construed from the industry to the regs, but please ask if I'm not making any sense. As a distributor in this industry, we sell pinball games, jukeboxes, dartboards, vending machines, and skill games. And so I'm here as the president of GAD to try and speak hopefully for some of my customers who could have made it or don't want to get up there and talk about it. I'm going to skip a lot of the things I had written down because you've already heard about it and you don't need to hear it again. But I do think when the information was pulled, Excel mentioned that they were talked to and it was discussed with them what would work in this situation. The largest operator of games based in the state, wholly in the state, was ignored, as were the other wholly Nebraska-based companies. And I think information from them would have been very helpful. It was mentioned, I believe, by Joyce that the $5,000 could be a major issue. While they have 50 games, there are people in this room that have less than 10. So $5,000 is a very large chunk of that money. The money these things make, if it was an average of $32 a day, like we heard, is $11,680 a machine, and that gets split with the location. And so a guy that runs 4 games, that leaves very little for him to make. These games are expensive. John's games run $4,000 or $5,000. The other games run anywhere from $9,000 to $13,000. These are not cheap to pick up and run. That's part of what I exist for is we service the machines, we provide the tech support, and we provide financing. My customers are some of the hardest working people you ever meet. They might be a little rough around the edges, but I think they deserve a little bit better than being run over by the large corporations. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thanks for coming in, Mr. Doble.
Mhm.
Questions for him? Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you for being here, Mr. Doble. Can you expound on the different distinction between distributor, operator, and location?
Okay. And again, it's not just in the bill, it's in the actual regs. What this refers to as an operator is a location. That's going to be your bar, restaurant, convenience store, whatever. The operator, and they're called an operator because they're the ones that actually run the game. They're the ones that collect the money. They're the ones that repair the game, provide the parts, the know-how, the knowledge. And as a distributor, I'm the one that distributes the game. I am a classic middleman, if you will. I buy the game from the manufacturer, I sell it to the operator, and I get my markup in there. But the reason I exist is because we have the knowledge to repair the games. We provide the tech support. We keep parts on hand. We keep games on hand. When you get an account, you typically can't wait a month and a half for something to get shipped into state and place it. When you get the account, they will expect you there yesterday. And so I keep inventory of games on hand. And it's not just skill games, but that is why we're here. So we'll try and focus on that. So if somebody can come pick it up the next day and have it on the location, assuming they have their stickers. They can call me from Broken Bow and tell me, I need to pick up 2 games. Can you get me the serial number and the board number so that they can send it into the DOR to get their stamp and get the process started. And we can deliver it, they can pick it up, but time is of the essence in this industry.
So I guess I'm trying to understand. So are we conflating your version of operator and distributor, or are we conflating operator and location?
I don't exist in this regulation.
Oh,
I guess that's where it really starts. As a distributor, I am not mentioned in this anywhere. But I don't know what else to call myself. We are a distributor in the language of the amusement industry and in the vending industry, which is the 2 industries I'm in.
So you're not one of the 76 distributors?
I'm not.
Okay. So you don't pay $5,000 under the statute?
I will have to, because I have games in my location. And to have a skill game in your location, period, you have to be registered as a distributor. I do every year. I do not operate the games. I do not run a single game, but I have games in my warehouse. Okay. And because I have games in my warehouse, I have to register as a distributor.
I see. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions for Mr. Doble? Go ahead, Senator Brewer.
Thank you. All right, and I'm going back to the handout that Brian and Rocky gave us here. So it shows operators at 1,611, but you're saying those are locations, not operators.
So those will be the bars and restaurants and what, yeah, and in
So
the industry, those are referred to as locations.
Okay, so if we call them locations, and then the number of decals / devices, 5,852, which comes out to about 4 per location if we divide it roughly.
Give or take, yeah.
All right, so 1611, just if you fall through the cracks and you're not one of the 76, how many others do we have fallen through the cracks and aren't part of that number that are on this sheet as distributors? Just trying to kind of understand how it all works.
To my knowledge, in this state, I am the only traditional distributor of skill games. There are other distributors of amusement devices, but I am not an expert, but from what I hear, we're the only ones that actually sell the games to anybody outside of their own internal company. There are companies out there that are distributors of amusement devices, and then they have an operating wing, and they just move the 2 between each other.
And did you build this binder?
I did not.
Fake check.
The one before. Okay, well, you're not getting any credit.
I don't want to steal anything.
Other questions for Mr. Doble? I have a question.
Okay.
So one of your concerns is how things are labeled, but okay. The $5,000. So in your opinion, maybe a tiered scale is a better solution for that, because as a distributor slash operator, if I only have 40 of these versus somebody that's got 800, maybe that 5,000 doesn't fall. Really. What about the 5% tax? Just all the things. What about the central database? What about, like, what are we opposing here completely?
Central server I have no problem with.
Okay.
As long as that doesn't end up coming back at
Right.
the people trying to operate the game. I think it's pretty much a standard across the areas. I am worried about that 5% holding at 5%. If you look at a South Dakota, for example, when they introduced the games, they were at 5 to 10%, and they're now at 50%. I don't know how anybody's in business up there. What they do operate is 40 to 50 years old, and when it breaks, they're going to be in trouble. So I worry about it staying at 5, I guess.
Okay, so the biggest concern is that $5,000.
It is definitely among the top. The 5%, staying at 5% would probably be my biggest concern.
Yeah, but that's a what if for anything.
It is.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Thanks for coming in. Next opponent.
Senators, thanks for having me today. My name is Ryan Cruz. Last name is Kruse. I represent Nebraska Technical Services. At current time, the longest standing amusement operator.
Okay, another Ryan. Spell how you spell Ryan.
RYAN. Apologies.
Sometimes people spell that differently. Okay, go ahead.
Apologies. Nebraska Technical Services, we've been around for 40 years, operating in many of the locations that we're talking about here. In a moment, my mother, Marilyn, 77-year-old mother who works 60 hours a week at our company, will come up and talk a little bit more about the impact on small business and from her reference. But what I do want to talk about just real quickly as far as our company was, first of all, there's been a lot of talk about the operator-distributor relationship. I won't get into that. That's already been addressed. But somewhere along the line, I do want to emphasize that the relationship between our companies, right, we are operators, and our locations is misunderstood. And I would say that largely because in the last several months, there has been what I would consider an arbitrary and random sales tax audit that showed up, which was contrary to the last 55 years of the way the occupation tax had been addressed in this state. Though that sales tax audit was only delivered to some operators, which I would ask you to investigate a bit. Also, there was a legislative resolution 98 that took place in the last several months. And with, respectfully, Senator Lowe, I do want to acknowledge this bill, this amendment is a lot closer to where it should be. And I appreciate all of that hard work. However, in the LR 98, you mentioned industry leaders. Well, industry leaders were not, to my knowledge, not invited to speak at that in that forum. And if the company that's been around the longest for 40 years was never asked to provide input, I would question the fairness of the information that was received through that process. You've already heard about the negative impact on locations, right? And this is not just nonprofits. We have a number of nonprofits. I would argue a number of them probably are going to have a hard time hitting that 60% threshold, which has already been addressed. But the burden really comes down to the regulation. Between added personnel, reconstruction costs, there's a lot of unseen things in this amendment that are going to put even more pressure on the locations. And the locations are the core of our business. At the end of the day, when we are still here as a Nebraska company and this thing potentially goes south, or maybe it's overregulated or overtaxed and that revenue is not there, these large out-of-state companies are going to pull up camp and go somewhere else. So I ask you to strongly consider the impact that this is having, not just on our business as operators, but the 98% of the people that we deal with, which are going to be small businesses. Lastly, I just want to say, how much money are we really making? I encourage you, take a look at the houses we live in, the cars we drive. It's all very, very easy to find. I think some of those numbers are inflated, not to mention the fact that probably $40 to $50 million of equipment is currently on the street. This stuff is not cheap. Thank you, Senators.
Thank you, Mr. Cruz. Questions for Mr. Cruz? All right, thanks for coming in, appreciate it. Next opponent. Could we have anybody, like, as you filter down in, if we've got a lot, who's raising hands if you're still going to, if you're gonna talk today? Oh, not that many. So maybe as you guys come down, fill the front, just so we can get things rolling. All right, go ahead. Thanks for coming in.
Hi, I'm Marilyn Cruz. That's Marilyn, last name is Cruz, Kruse,
And please spell Marilyn.
Marilyn.
Okay, thank you.
I am one of the co-owners of Nebraska Technical Services. And as my son indicated, yes, we started 40 years ago, with the one Pac-Man machine, never realizing what it was all going to turn into. With the dart, we have darts from the pool, pinball, we have ATMs, we have security systems now, and the skill games. We have, like I said, we're a Nebraska company. We have 50 employees, all live in Nebraska and have. We have, since skill games come out, we have readily complied with all your rules, regulations, getting the $250 decals for each game and all the mountains of paperwork that entails. Not like when we just had the $35 decals for the dartboards, pinball, and jukeboxes where you just put it on the game. Now you have to fill out paperwork after paperwork to get the right game that has been certified, the board numbers, the serial numbers, the cabinet numbers and everything, and then the location that it's going to, and all that has to be sent in along with the Form 57 that the location owner has had to fill out, or location owner has filled out. All that has to be okay before it's brought back, and then we can put it on the game and take it to the location. We have complied with, like I say, all the rules and regulations. You'll note that we've had a very clear and good record. We haven't had any violations as far as any of our games have been sealed. We have a good relationship with our inspector. We work together, and that's the way we would like to continue it. It just seems to me that I don't know, first, the skill games in the first years, it was able to have the $35 decal. Okay, then they realized how largely popular they were, and it was raised to the $250 decal. Okay, we went along with that. And it just seems there's just more and more and more. And in the last, they even talked about what they were going to do with other skill games like pinball machines, dartboards, pool tables. What's next? And it's basically, like they've said before, it's the small businesses are our customers. Small business and they don't have the money, the manpower to take care of all these regulations that you may want to have. There has to be a better way.
Thank you. Do we have questions for Ms. Cruz? Nothing? I'll just have one. How many of these kind of skill games do you guys have then?
We have around 600 and some right now.
600 and some.
I believe that's correct.
I'll put 600-ish.
Ish, yeah.
Thanks for coming in. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Next opponent.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Brian Halleck, BRIAN HALAC. I'm the pinball and jukebox repair guy and also the owner of Meat Frog Entertainment, LLC. Just got a quick story. Is basically I fix pinballs and stuff at people's houses. That's what I do. I literally left a job a few years ago to tackle it by myself, to get out of the 9-to-5 to give a little more time to my family and so on and so forth. Well, after I took off, I ended up getting a knock at my door from the Department of Revenue. And the reason I'm bringing this up, this isn't a sympathy thing. This is actually a story. I ended up 2 years after I got into it, I got a knock on the door from the Department of Revenue saying I need to audit you. It's like, okay, fine, Here's all my stuff. I'm not trying to hide, not trying to run. It's like, what am I going to be a couple $1,000s difference, whatever. Well, they came back to me with like a $60,000 sales tax thing that they told me I owed them. It's like, really? It's like, you guys going to give me this 5-6 years of $60,000 sales tax that I didn't even know I was supposed to collect. So they want to collect it. They don't care about my scenario. They didn't know that they don't care about me running or anything like that. They just want their money. It's like, okay, whatever. This is what it is. But for a guy like me, I don't have much. So it's pretty detrimental to my living. So the reason why I digress. So now I have a tax burden, right? So then I got into the skill games about a couple years ago, and we tried 6-7 locations. They sucked. They didn't even pay their sales tax stamps, which they raised on us. So that really made it very unequitable for me. So then we finally got to 2 locations to put our $80,000 worth of machines in, because these things are expensive, like everyone says. So you get to that point, it's like, okay, now this is making me this much money. Now with the new regulations that Lowe has in his bill, if I don't pay that burden by the end of the year, then I can lose my license to have all these machines. Therefore, you're going to bankrupt the meat frog and you're going to bankrupt the pinball guy. And I'm not saying this to woe is me, whatever. I'm saying this is because there's other people out here that have employees, cars, health insurance, all that stuff to worry about, where I don't. I can go live in a paper box if I need to. These people don't. They have employees and everybody to work with. So for you guys to regulate us like we're a bunch of criminals by doing these cavity checks on our crime records every year just because we have to come out and do all this paperwork and stuff. I don't have anybody. I don't have assistants, anybody. So I have to go do this personally. I have to go do all this. I don't have employees to go do all this stuff. So then I have to worry about one of my locations losing their liquor license. If he loses that liquor license, I'm asked out. What do I do? If the other location that I have doesn't, so I'm just basically looking to lose everything I have because of the regulations on how we get regulation. I don't care about all your fees and stuff at this time. I mean, it does. That $5,000, I don't know what I'm going to do there. But all this rest of the stuff, this is going to put me out of business just because of the regulations. I'm a Nebraskan. I've been in Nebraska all my life. And for everybody to get up here and let all these guys that are coming in from the state just come in droves with all their monies, we don't care. Yeah, this sounds great. No, it doesn't. This is a crock.
You're out of time. Do we have questions for Mr. Halleck? So I have one. So you're considered a distributor then.
Compared to the bill, technically
On the bill,
I'm an
but
operator.
I'm going to say distributor / operator.
Yes.
And how many devices do you have?
I have about 15.
15.
I'm small potatoes.
So what do you think about the sliding scale for the fee?
For the $5,000 fee?
Right.
Well, I mean, that'd be a tough one to do because you have to make it equitable for every solution. So it depends on how you guys structure it.
Okay.
I'm not totally against any, taxables at all, but the regulations along with the taxes, along with the sales tax that you're trying to throw.
Well, like in my opinion, the sales tax on what a machine makes is a fair way of doing it than just the flat rate, which has been done in the past. So
Right.
Therefore, if you have, like you mentioned, a couple locations didn't even make enough to cover the sticker. So then the sales tax turned in would be almost nothing because they didn't make any. So, and then versus the one out, I don't know, along the interstate that's bringing in however much a month, that, those to me should be handled differently. And that kind of helps.
No, that is correct.
Okay.
That would be correct. That'd be a better situation.
But you're more, the cavity search thing had me laugh because I was like, I didn't know I thought judiciary. Thankfully I wasn't, but so it's some of those that you feel are onerous. The clearly the yearly, whatever background check and things like that.
Yes,
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much. Have a good
Absolutely.
evening.
Next opponent.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jarvis Nettles. I'm from Omaha, Nebraska, District 10. I am a
Spell your name, please.
Jarvis. Last name is Nettles.
You gotta spell that. It's not for me.
N
It's
is in
for-
Nancy, ETTLES. TTLES.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
I am another small distributor, operator. I have 15 games, probably 2 locations. One of those locations being Blondo Bingo. I'm very concerned about the regulations of this. A lot of things don't make any sense to me, especially for Blondo Bingo, a nonprofit. Diversity of merchandise. There's also in the bill the level of business activity being conducted in the space. As you know, bingo, depending on the number of nonprofits they have, they're already tapped as far as how many days they can have, how many hours. They're regulated on how many employees they have. So I'm very afraid that something like this being passed, or how it sits and how it reads right now, having a discussion with Blondo Bingo, they're out. They don't want anything to do with this if they're going to be regulated that hard. I mean, they sell snacks, pop, pickle cards, things of that nature. I mean, I think this is very heavy-handed for guys like that don't have the budget to have someone calculating what 60%, and what is that? 60% of snacks and pop? So I think that needs to go. I'm one of those small businesses that I think if this will kill me. This will kill my entrepreneurial foray. I mean, I can't compete with a lot of the bigger, and most of these companies. I have no problem with them competing and beating me straight up, but losing because of regulation, I think that sucks. I think that sucks for a lot of small Nebraska businesses that will go out of business because we can't deal with the regulation part. That those guys have advantages, they can do it. I don't have money to speak with lobbyists. I don't get to get my opinion unless I'm coming here speaking with you guys today. I'm not heard, and I'm not the only one. There's a lot of people like that, and I'm really afraid for people like that are going to lose something they helped create and build. These are not new companies. They just didn't come out of nowhere. These guys have been doing this for generations. Family members have been doing this, and I think it'd be a really crappy way to have that stop, is because of regulation, and having something that should be protecting us, the government, should not be putting these people out of business. Not sure why the casino, other than they have a lot more money for lobbyists, but we got to be careful listening to those guys. These are the same guys that said they're going to give us $80 to $100 million in property tax relief, and they put up $13 million. To me, it's an airball. So let's be very careful with who we're listening to, and the reason why they want some of these regulations in this bill. We need help. For someone that's a small Nebraskan, help, please. Thank you.
Oh, wait. Gotta ask, see if there's any questions.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Nettle? Oh, come on. I'm just kidding. I have one question. What was the distributor fee / operator fee, whatever? We're proposing this to be 5,000. What was it what is it right now?
There was no fees for becoming a distributor, but we just paid the $250.
Is this a 250 per
Correct.
machine? Okay. All right, that's good.
Thank
you. Thanks for coming in. Blondo Bingo. Go to do that. All right. Name.
My name
spell
is
it,
Dennis
please.
Meng, Dennis Meng, from Alliance, Nebraska.
That's a long way.
I do own a bar in Alliance. So I started as a location. Alliance is kind of out there in the middle of the panhandle, and I took over a route doing pinball machines, pool tables, jukeboxes at locations up in the northern panhandle there. And so I'm kind of in a unique position where I am a distributor of the 76, and I have about 21 locations that I operate, jukeboxes, skill games, all that sorts of stuff in there. The locations do not need any more burden put on them from this bill. I mean, it's tough to make a living in this type of business as far as a restaurant, bar, that kind of thing. They've already done the background checks. They've already been to their local authority, approved to open or apply for the liquor license. Then you do the state patrol fingerprints, you do the background check, you do an interview. Then you send it to the liquor commission for approval. All that's done. It's required to do it once to get a liquor license. For it to be done again, to do it cash devices that you have in there, in your location, that, you know, it's something that brings people into your location. They sits there, it may hold them there for a while because they don't have, you know, they're gonna go and watch TV. They might want to sit there and play a skill game, might want to listen to music on a jukebox, shoot a game of pool, something like that. You know, it keeps those people in their locations. The terminology for this bill has never been right for what we do. Like I say, a location's a location, and you're dealing with about 76 operators, which you guys call distributors. Really makes no sense as far as business is concerned. How that's termed. I think if we're moving forward here with some sort of bill, I really like the idea of this being, you know, regulated so that we can know that it's a good thing to spend all this money on these skill games. They do cost a lot to buy these, put them out, and then you've got breakdown fees, maintenance, stuff like that, parts. There's always something going wrong with them. Got to fix them. Always money going out that isn't, you know, coming in as good as anybody would think it is. So it does make it tough. And, you know, I would just like to see that if we're going to push forward with a bill, that the bill actually reflects what we do as Nebraskans working in Nebraska, and that it's all correct. So we don't have to keep coming down here every year to go through this type of thing. Because it's a long ways from Alliance.
Thank you for driving it. Do we have questions from Mr. Ming? Senator Brewer.
So right now you have how many machines out that you,
Right about 68 machines, I believe.
and it's distributed amongst what counties? Box Butte,
Fox Butte,
Dawes.
Dawes, Sheridan, and Keith.
No? Okay, thank you.
And I do pay property taxes in every one of those counties on the value of these machines.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and thanks for making the trip. You mentioned cash device. What did you mean by that?
Cash device, skill games.
So that's, you call it the same thing?
A cash device.
Okay, I'm just,
Is a skill
a
game.
few people have said that, and I've been meaning to ask somebody what you mean.
I think it was in the previous law, it was called the cash device, or we apply for a cash device license, which is the $250 decal. That used to be $35. The $5,000 thing, I know you've asked a lot of people that. I don't know if there can be any kind of tier to that. I mean, we're going from a zero license right now, zero fee license, to $250 for the location, which I know this kind of legislation right here would probably wipe out half of my 20 locations as far as not wanting to deal with skill games, cash devices.
And of those 20, you said it might wipe out half your 20 locations, so 10 of them.
Yes.
And do you have any idea of how much those generate in revenue for the state or in
It
those local
varies.
taxes you're
I
talking
mean,
about?
I've got $100 a week. I've got locations that do several $100 a week. I've got locations that are really good. I've got, you know, ones that you almost consider not putting a $250 stamp on 3 machines because that's $750. Does it generate that much on top of the cost of jumping in the pickup and driving to Crawford, which is 60 miles away, to fix something that isn't making any money anyway? I mean, it varies. Some locations, they do good. I know my veterans clubs, they really seem to thrive. You know, those older people that have served, that are members out there, are the greatest guys that you could ever just sit and talk to. Really enjoy that. And that's another thing, is that, you know, these big companies that all came in and say, oh yeah, we want this. They see that 5% at the end, and yeah, that looks good for everything, you know, as long as it stays at 5%, but that can go anywhere as soon as it gets out of this committee.
Can I go back? You mentioned veterans clubs. We talked a little bit about nonprofits having some problem meeting the income threshold requirements. Are you worried about that for your veterans clubs?
Well, yeah, and the way that's worded with the 60%, 40%, I mean, I don't know how you would track that anyway. Would you track that with sales tax based off of your, what you're paying in on sales tax on your food revenue or your alcohol sales or your whatever you're selling? Every location that I have has a liquor license, so I know they have to submit, sales tax for what they sell as far as in their business every day. They do that monthly. And once they have to start doing all this other stuff, because they really don't have any involvement with these cash devices other than they have an employee that somebody brings up a voucher that they printed out of a device and they redeem that voucher for cash. That's pretty much the only thing that the location does with these things. What you consider a distributor, which I consider an operator, we go in and we're about the only people that need to deal with the state as far as submitting any kind of taxes, anything like that, because we're the ones going in and physically taking the money out of the machines. So we can hold that. If there's 5% sales tax, we can hold that. You're dealing with 70 some distributors instead of dealing with 1,000 locations that don't have time to sit there and do this stuff every month, every quarter, to track it, to do any of that kind of stuff. I mean, their responsibilities that they have already are pretty hard in this day and age, especially with employees. You've got minimum wage is $15 an hour now, plus all the stuff associated with that. Your contributions as far as an employer or having these employees, it just keeps making it tougher and tougher to keep a place open and keep people employed. It really does.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right. Thanks for coming all the way here.
You bet.
Next opponent.
How are we?
Go ahead. Name first.
My name is Todd Carpenter, TODDCARPENTER. I had a great speech, but I don't want to bother with that. But so, some questions that we had. How many? I'd like to know how many proponents have Nebraska driver's license. Is one of the things that people, the first ones that come up here to talk. Thank you. So the next thing is distributor operator. We have that language is messed up. I am what is classified as a distributor. I'm really an operator. It's how it should be. It needs to be redefined. The distributors are the makers of bank shot. They're the manufacturer. They're the actual distributors of the games. We are operators, and then Sonny's Bar is a location. So that's how it should be written in the law. To clarify that all up, we've had that. It's been an issue all day. Why do we need the $5,000 in the first place? I guess that was one of the questions. Does revenue need $5,000 for every year? I believe revenue's sitting pretty good, to be honest with you. And I know that everybody's like, well, we could do a tier system, and it is not fair for a playing field for the locals, for the small guy. Now, if you're a big company, you can brush off the $5,000 because you got 8, 9, 1,500 games. They have a ton, so the $5,000 is not a big deal for big companies. It does hurt the littler guys, the smaller Nebraskan people. The central server, Senator Hughes always asks, do I have an issue with the information that's gathered? I do not. What my problem is the central server is very expensive. We don't know that, but we do know that it is expensive. And the expenses has to come from somewhere. So is the state of Nebraska going to eat that money? Or are we going to eat how does that work? We can collect the money as sales tax, just like we do with regular sales tax. If we had games out, and let's say the games did 50,000 net a month. Okay. So we would, just like any other sales tax, we would collect the 50,000 from from the location, and we would write down and we would send that month check to the state every month. Just like sales tax is, you pay on the 25th for last month's sales tax. It would be a lot simpler, and it would not cost any money. So that's just throwing that out there. So if you would, we would collect the money, the distributors or the operators, what we would say, the 74 of us would collect the money, and then we would cut a check every month to the state of Nebraska for the 5%, which I would love if it would stay 5%. I really would. I'm just more scared that when it gets out of here, things get pretty, it's like running the gauntlet. It's what I would call it if this bill proceeds, that at the end of the day, we don't know what's going to be in the bill is what I mean. Is it going to be 5? Is it going to be 10? Is it going to be 15, 20? Is it gross? Is it net? Once the language gets all done, at the time it gets through all the final readings, that's what scares a lot of us, is that Senator Lowe does have, I agree with Senator Lowe or Chairman Senator, a lot of things that he does says good is one is the background checks. That is for, sorry, do I need to quit talking?
No. Oh, yeah, you're out of time. Sorry. I was not paying attention, was I really?
It's
I'm
all right.
so sorry. I let you talk longer than you're supposed to. Sorry about.
Could you finish your statement concerning background checks?
Okay, so if we would, the background checks, which I agree with Senator Lowe on this, most, all my locations are liquor licensed locations. So they've already gone through the background checks. They've been fingerprinted. They've been checked out. They know the laws, and they have to. We know who they are, and the state, the Liquor Commission uses the state patrol as their arm, as their enforcement. So they have power and control to regulate anything that goes on in that establishment. So these games, that one of Senator Lowe's last year when we were here for 685 was that these games are everywhere and not in, and whether they pop up in a game room, which I am against that. And there's other locations that I thought you could throw in there that every location should have a liquor license if you want these games, just because of the control. Do we need more of that regulation? The 60% threshold is honest to God, I believe, in there to eliminate the little guy, is to take out the person who can't make it. Your nonprofits, your bingo parlors, maybe I don't know too many other people that would probably fall underneath that, but it would wipe out quite a few. And of course, it doesn't hurt the large ones that are in truck stops, convenience stores. Doesn't affect them at all. It really does hurt the little person. Other than that, the central server, as I said, just for the cost, I was more concerned about the cost. If it was going to come back on us as, hey, I've heard anywhere from this number to 20 million, and how's this going to go out? Well, they're just going to take a percentage. It's going to cost this. Geez, and we're worried about collecting the information. I'm not. You can, but we can figure out a way to collect tax. I think a better way. But
Other questions from Mr. Carpenter?
all right.
I have one. How many
Okay.
games? So you're a distributor / operator.
Sure.
How many games do you have?
220.
Mid-size.
Sure, I would say that.
All right. Thanks for coming in.
Appreciate it.
Next opponent. Ooh, none? How about neutral capacity? One, none? All right. Senator Lowe, back up to the front.
First of all, I'd like to thank everyone who showed up today. Whether you're a proponent or an opponent, I remember the days during COVID when there was nobody in here. It was hard to judge what a bill is going to do. We had no clue. And I really worry about those days if that ever comes back again. We had a great discussion today, especially from the opponents. They brought out their views and we listened. There's a 5% tax on this. I have been known to pull my own bills if they get changed. I will not let that number go up. I swear to you on that. This bill will die if it does. As far as the other things, I'm willing to listen and see what works. By taking control of this now and doing it right with some of the feedback that has been said here today, you don't have to come back from Alliance or from Kearney again next year. I appreciate the freedom and Joyce and Greg, Mr. Fox, for coming and testifying. The Cruzes, the Nettles, and listening to the smaller operators that showed up today. I knew this wasn't a finished product when I brought it, but it was better. And I think everybody learned a little bit more this time than last time. And we learned a whole lot last year with this bill. We're going to try to make this as good as we can get and make it fair for everybody. And try not to put businesses out of business. That is not my goal. I also don't want to raise taxes, but we do need to tax more than what we're taxing now. So with that, I end my testimony. And thank you again for being here and driving down from Alliance and across the state. And there are people here that didn't testify. And I'm sure they came from all over the state. And I'm sure they wanted to break my kneecaps. And maybe you still want to break my kneecaps, but I'm listening. So thank you.
All right. So that ends, oh, no, you don't have a question. Can we ask?
Can we ask you a question?
Yes, you can ask a question, Senator.
Sure.
You
I'm
can.
not telling you no.
All right. I think, I wish we could have had some of the later ones early because they helped to draw a picture where you could better understand what was happening. And I think as we moved on and we understood the difference between location and operators and manufacturers and distributors, because I was spinning pretty hard for a while there and it was hard to get it to line up to where it made sense. The 5,000, so where we're at now with 250 and the 35, so it's basically 285 per, is that kind of where we're at? And we're looking at this morphing into a, depending on where you're at, a 250 or 5,000. I can see why they're concerned if the 5 doesn't stay where it's at. That's going to be obviously a reason to be concerned because the government never increases the amount they tax people, of course. And then the 5,000 is kind of a cookie cutter that doesn't fit everywhere. I mean, I can see if you're big enough to where that wouldn't take a terrible gouge out of you. But to figure out a fair amount as we steer down to the ones that are much smaller and have less resources. I mean, that's where the concern I think comes from shutting things down because we just tax so hard they got nothing left. I mean, is that kind of how you see it? So I think we take some of this most recent 4 or 5 that spoke and take a look at some of that to figure out, where we can find a fair middle ground on this. A lot of logic came with some of that.
We'll do the math.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else? And I should mention that there were comments 48 opponents, 0 proponents, and 0 neutral. So.
Guess this is not on the consent agenda.
Anyway, all right. Thank you all for coming here and listening. Appreciate it. I know it's a kind of a crazy weather day again, so thank you.
Working on this.
Nice job, Mike.
I totally screwed up that last one. You're right. I was like totally listening to